Okay, so a very good afternoon to everyone, and I welcome all of you to the lectures on Nobel Prizes and Abel Prize 2021. As you can see in the screen, there will be 6 talks, 5 on Nobel Prizes and 1 on Abel Prize in mathematics. So I take this opportunity to thank all the speakers for agreeing to deliver the lectures in their respective research fields. So now I request Professor Gauri Shankar, the director of IISER Mohali, to give the welcome address. Professor Gauri Shankar.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon. So I'm very happy that this event is being organized where our faculty colleagues are going to present to us the highlights of the work of the 2021 Nobel laureates, and which were responsible for them to be chosen for the prize in 2021. As most of you are aware, this has been a tradition of the institute to have the talks on Nobel prizes, which has been partly affected because of the COVID pandemic. I remember that it was there within a few weeks of my joining in late 2019. But after that, we've not been able to have it in the intervening year 2020, and we are having it slightly delayed for 2021. But I'm also hoping, given the kind of situation that we are going through in terms of recovering from the pandemic, hopefully, this will, I hope, be the last of the online lecture series, as it were, and that we can soon get back to physical lectures. Full credit to the Dean R&D team, especially Dr. Vijayanand and Dr. Rachna Chaba, for putting this together. And of course, thanks in advance to all the speakers who are going to explain to us the Nobel Prizes today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gauri Shankar. So now let us get into the program. So please note that each speakers will have 25 minutes to highlight the Nobel or Abel research work. And this will be followed by 5 minutes of question and answer session. So I request all the speakers to kindly stick to the time. And attendees through Zoom link may ask questions directly, or you can also post it in the chat box. And attendees through a YouTube link are requested to post their questions in the YouTube chat box. Okay, still since we have very less time for question and answer session, so we will try to accommodate as many questions as possible. So now I request Dr. Rachna Chaba to take over the screen. Dr. Chaba.
Thank you, Dr. Vijayanand. I would like to first invite Dr. Adrienne de Cruz, a faculty member in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, to deliver a talk on Nobel Prize in Literature for the year 2021. Over to you, Dr. Adrienne.
Yeah, thanks, Rachna. I'll just share my screen. Let me know whether you can see it. Is it visible?
Yeah, your screen is visible. Yeah.
Okay. So the Nobel Prize for Literature 2021 was given to Abdul Razak Gurna, and this is how the citation reads: for his uncompromising and compassionate penetration of the effects of colonialism and the fates of the refugee in the gulf between cultures and continents. As you see on your screen, we could see that in his works, Gurna refers extensively to the aftermath of colonialism, the fates of the refugees. I mean, these two themes, they resonate in Gurna's works, most of his works, and I'll be delving into these themes in the course of the lecture. So let me introduce to you Abdul Razak Gurna's life and times. He was born in 1948 in Tanzania, Zanzibar. He is of Arab heritage, and this heritage is of extreme importance because of his exodus from Zanzibar to the UK. So following the Zanzibar Revolution in 1964, which led to the overthrow of the ruling Arab elite by local African revolutionaries. This particular period witnessed a large number of people of Arab heritage, okay, leaving Zanzibar to other parts of the world. So Gurna also left Zanzibar and then he went to UK in 1968. He got his PhD from University of Kent, and his thesis is titled Criteria in the Criticism of West African Fiction. He became a professor of English and post-colonial literature at the University of Kent, where he taught until his retirement. So if you look at the larger perspective or the larger, his work belongs to this, this area of post-colonial literature. And he's one of the first writers to have explained the conditions in Zanzibar, okay, during the colonial times. So his works heavily relies on historical details. These are the novels that he has written. Memory of Departure, this is the first one, 1987, followed by The Pilgrim's Way, 1988, then Doughty, 1990, Paradise, 1994. He's known for his work, Paradise, Admiring Silence, 1996, By the Sea, which is again a well-known work, 2001, Desertion in 2005, The Last Gift in 2011, then Gradle Heart in 2017, and Afterlives in 2020. So I will begin with the recent work, which is Afterlives 2020. And apart from being a novelist, he is also an essayist. He has written a couple of critical works, and he has contributed extensively to non-fiction category as well. He came up with edited volumes, and he worked extensively on Salman Rushdie's works, and he brought out the companion to Salman Rushdie in 2007. His essays on African writers and post-colonial writers are well known. Some of them are V.S. Naipaul, Salman Rushdie, and Zomokum. So you could see that his area of interest is post-colonial writing, and his thrust is on African milieu, background. I'll begin before going into 3 of his works. I have chosen 3 to 4 of his works. Before going into that, I'll give you a brief overview of what he generally deals with, the themes that he deals with in his works. The overarching themes in his works include the global refugee crisis, the effects of racism, okay, in the post-colonial as well as in the contemporary times, prejudice against targeted communities and religions. So because he's of Arab heritage, he himself had to go through a lot of prejudices and racist kind of remarks. His novels are exemplary examples of dealing with cultures of oppression of the colonial past and of the present. So I'll just give you examples from some of his novels to elucidate these points. We could see that in his novels there are constant references to the presence of Omanis, British, German, and French presence in the African coast. So Africa, Zanzibar in particular, is a place that he usually chooses as his fictional present. And we could see that all these colonial powers, their presence and how they treated the natives as well as the people in that particular area. These are the, the themes that he, which we find in his novels. Afterlives 2020, here the larger context is colonialism and racism. This is his recent work. He describes the experiences of Hamza, Ilyas, and Afia. Of course, there are other characters in the novel. For want of time, I'm just restricting myself to these 3 characters. Now, Ilyas is a character. He's a very young. He was very young. Okay, when the novel started off, he's being portrayed as a boy who was stolen from his parents by the German colonial troops. His sister is lost, and there's a search for his sister. That is what the entire novel is about. And also the novel has a parallel kind of history of Hamza, who fled the bonded labor and ends up serving the colonial master. So these are the two parallel plots that are there in Afterlives. In this novel, as I've mentioned earlier, there is heavy reliance on historical details because it's a post-colonial work. Post-colonial works usually rely heavily on historical details. So this particular work expounds the German invasion of East Africa and the senseless violence which was meted out to the inhabitants. Okay. Also, this work talks about young African mercenaries who are recruited in the German army to fight against the British. So this is the historical context in which the novel is written. Also, one sees the brutal reality of German colonial troops against the Africans. Okay. Also, there is a reference to a historical event which is named the Maji Maji Rebellion, which is an armed rebellion of Islamic and Africans against German colonial rule in East Africa. So this is the historical context in which this particular novel is being set. Okay. Also, the invasion of British in Zanzibar, that also finds mention in this novel, and their entire mission to civilize, the white man's burden that is of, always talked about in the post-colonial circles. Their mission to civilize people, civilization mission is exactly the way it is written in Gurna's Afterlives. So this is a story of Hamza, Ilyas, and Afia, and the historical context is that of German invasion of East Africa as well as the presence of British in East Africa. Cross-continental migration, this is an important theme in Gurna's work, again from Afterlives. We could see that there are micro elements of characters' life intertwined with history. Both these things are, inextricably linked. Okay? Historical details as well as personal life. Also, we could see that Zanzibar is known for spice trade. Okay? So, island of spices. I think that's what Zanzibar is known for. And for that reason, we could see that the stories have references. Stories have references to a lot of mariners as well as merchants. Okay? So this class of people, they dominate his narratives. I'm quoting from an article that I came across in the Hindu by Vaishnav Roy's titled "The Still Silent Heart: Abdul Gurna's Afterlives." So the sweep of big history through the little histories of Khalifa, Afia, Hamza, and Ilyas. We are not just introduced to Khalifa's father Qasim, a poor Gujarati Muslim, but we also learn about his tax collector father, his scholarship in a Bombay school, how he sailed across the Arabian Sea to the African coast for a bookkeeping job, how he married an African woman and begat Khalifa. Qasim's little memoir becomes a window into the immense history of cross-continental migration. So if you look at his works, we could see that there are a lot of instances of cross-continental migration, and I've seen that particularly that he mentions a lot of, there are a lot of Indian references in his works. There is a character who is a Gujarati Muslim. There is a character from Punjab, and there is also a character from Bombay. So we could see that a lot of people coming to this particular coast of East Africa for trading purposes, which constitutes what Vaishnav Roy calls as cross-continental migration. So his first book is important, the first work titled Memory of Departure. This talks about the trauma of displacement. This book reflects Gurna's own heritage okay, vis-a-vis the Zanzibar history. And this book, this novel talks more about what makes people move from one country to another. And experience speaks. I mean, Gurna's experience, he says that out of his experience, he says that it is violence, war, and which fuel displacement. And in some cases, it is poverty. Bloodshed and displacement. I mean, one could very well relate to what he's saying, because he's also a victim of such a displacement. He had to move from Zanzibar to UK because of Zanzibar revolution, which took the lives of a lot of Arabs in Zanzibar. And it is also a story of refugees and asylum seekers and their lost homeland. So refugee crisis is one particular theme that runs through all of Gurna's works. Refugee literature, this comes again from his experience. He says, I came to England when these words such as asylum seeker were not quite the same. More people are struggling and running from terror states. So this is from Gurna's work, much more violent. This is a work that he has done for the BBC in 2021. And he talks about the impact of the Zanzibar revolution in terms of the refugee crisis. Thousands were slaughtered, whole communities were expelled, and many hundreds imprisoned. In the shambles and persecutions that followed, vindictive terror ruled our lives. This is from The Guardian, 2001, titled Fear and Loathing by Gurna. By the Sea, 2001, expands on this particular topic of refugee crisis. Okay, this is a tale of Salah Omar and Latif Muhammad, how Salah Omar was treated at the Gatwick airport, okay, as a refugee. So the first few pages are entirely devoted to the racial discrimination that one could see at the airport. Also, Gurna talks about the failure of post-colonial state and the failure of humanity in the UK. Okay, so this is the subject that he takes up in By the Sea. And in the novel, he espouses this view that people negotiate their own safety and cannot rely on institutions. When I see people here, he refers to the refugees. Okay. There is a kind of hostility which is seen towards the refugees and the presence of detention camps. Okay, the presence of detention camps and the way in which the refugees are being treated in these detention camps. This is what is the subject of this particular novel. And a lecture series in 2021 based on Professor Gurna's work, By the Sea. It's wonderful to watch this. It's available on YouTube if anybody is interested. One could work on to watch this. The Indian Ocean Working Group, okay, and there is a lecture series on Gurna. And I'm taking this reference from this particular site. Paradise, 1994. One particular, I think, what is quintessentially Gurna is how he looks at the political tales through the family lens. Okay. Paradise, as I've told you, this is a work that he is well known for. It's a tale of Yusuf who sold to his uncle Aziz, okay, who's a merchant, and Yusuf's father selling his son in repayment of a debt. It talks about the bonded labor which exists in this country. In this work, what Gurna does is he conflates individual human stories with political tales of Omani and European colonial powers' control and oppression in Africa. So this particular, he's known for this story because there is the politics of the state is being investigated through a family angle. Okay? Memory plays an important role in refugee literature, and so is the work of Gurna. We could see that there are shocking memories where the personal level always encounters the larger traumas of the past and that of present history. So if you look at refugee literature, one could see that the memory plays an important role. And Paradise is all about recollection and memories of the lost homeland. One could also see that in this work, there is a kind of a tussle between communities, okay, not necessarily between the colonial powers and the oppressed, okay, but also between or amongst communities, okay, one community taking over the other. And the power relationship starts with the smallest unit of the society, which is family. Okay, so that is what this particular novel talks about. So towards the end, I would like to spend a little bit of time on his writing style, which is again very, very unique. His writing style is unique in the sense that the plots are all non-linear. I mean, it's not that it starts with one particular plot and then ends. There are parallel plots which are going, and then there is a back and forth going between the plots. It's non-chronological in nature. And as far as his language is concerned, he writes in English, but his novels contain a lot of words from other languages and references to other parts of the world. And often we see that these words are not paraphrased, or the meanings of these words are not given. Okay, it is woven into the texture of the novel. Okay, it's not that there is a foreign word, so then he introduces the foreign word, and he doesn't do that. Okay? I mean, he just keeps on giving words in between English, and sometimes it is difficult for us to make out what it is. There are references to Swahili, which is the language which is spoken in Zanzibar, Arabic, yes, German, and also references to Hindi words in his works. Yeah. A lot of languages coming together in a work reflect a multilingual existence, and there are interactions of different cultures. And he says that it's deliberate on his part to write like this, because this is one of the ways he could resist majoritarian attitude. So in conclusion, I would say that Gurna's works are not merely autobiographical. It could not be read as only autobiographical. There are several instances in his novels which have contemporary relevance. I mean, you would have noticed the themes that he deals with. They're all of contemporary relevance, and the themes are often from historical accounts, often ungenerous ones. Okay, one that most of the time he refers to is that of the revolutions which happened in Africa, East Africa. And his novels also talks about the memories of lost homeland and longing for a lost past. Gurna's novels challenge racist assumptions, okay, and racist remarks that he himself had to undergo a lot in UK. Okay. The enduring presence of a colonialist outlook in present times. I think this is the most important part of his novel. And if you listen to his interviews, one could clearly see that he's talking about the influence of the colonialist outlook even in the present times. Okay, so yeah, so the final point that I would like to make is all of his works, they talk about the journey. They talk about the journey from one place to another. So there is movement or mobility which dominates his entire narrative. And he talks about the world of safaris. The safaris are basically travelers. So his novels are to do with, I mean, there's a lot of mention of traveling from one place to another. So for those who want to read Gurna, and then, I mean, this is one particular reference that I would like to give you. Pranoy Roy's interview I mean, of Abdul Razak Gurna, very recent one. And it's wonderful to listen to Pranoy Roy and the Nobel laureate. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne, for a wonderful talk and also for finishing ahead of time. So we do have time for a few questions. If there are any questions from the audience who have joined through Zoom, you can either ask questions or you can either post in the chat box. Any questions from YouTube viewers? So there are no questions from YouTube viewers as well. So if audience has any questions.
I had a quick question. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So, in such a situation where so much of the novel is about political and historical commentary, you really distinguish between the fact that it's a commentary and that there is some fictional aspect which perhaps is not quite historical.
Yeah, so this is one question which is usually posed to post-colonial writers, okay? But what they do is they do take history into consideration, but they weave a plot around that historical event. For example, this particular author, what he does is he's not known in Zanzibar that much. I mean, now that he has bagged the Nobel, people would know him. But one of his he says that one of his motives is that he would like to bring out the historical details through a novel, through a fiction, through a form of fiction, so that perhaps people might read it and it might resonate with them much more than reading a historical work. So I think that is one particular thing that he does. I mean, most of the post-colonial writers do that. But if you read the work, it's not the way I have presented it. If you read the work, you can see sometimes he underplays the history, and the family takes, the family becomes much more important, and the historical details run through the narrative of the family.
Are there more questions for Adrienne? If there are no more questions, let's thank Adrienne again for a wonderful talk. I would now like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Samarjit Bhattacharya, faculty member in the Department of Biological Sciences, to deliver a talk on Nobel Prize in Physiology Medicine. Samarjit, yeah.
Thanks, Rachna. So I'm now sharing the slide.
We can see your slide, Samarjit. That's great.
Yeah, but 1 second. It will probably just give me a second. Yes. So can you see it now?
Yes.
And let me change the slide. I want to make sure that it's changing. Did it change?
Yes, it did.
Okay. All right. So can I start now?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Rachna, Vijayanand, and other organizers for this opportunity. So I'm going to talk about the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine that was awarded to two scientists in 2021. And they are David Julius from University of California, San Francisco, and Arden Pataputian from the Scripps Research Institute for their discoveries of receptors for sensing temperature and touch. Okay. So before going to their work, let me first give you a very brief idea about their field the field that they worked on. And I'll try to keep it very simple. Now, when they started their work, it was known that most cells communicate in the body, most cells communicate via chemicals. But it was not known that how do we sense the physical stimulus, such as temperature and pressure. So when Julius and Pataputian started their work, it was a kind of a complete black box that how do we sense, physical stimulus such as temperature and pressure. Now we all know that we sense our external environment through our 5 senses, right? The sense of smell, which is called olfaction, the sense of taste, then hearing, that is our auditory system, and then we see things through our visual system. And we have another faculty of sense that is called sense of touch, which is mechanical or thermal in nature. Now, when they started their work, we had a fair bit of idea about the molecular mechanisms that govern the other four senses, okay, like sense of smell, taste, then the hearing, as well as our visual system. We had a fair bit of idea about the molecular mechanisms that is going on in our brain. But we had no idea about how we sense the touch, So this area is very, very important in terms of in various fields in neuroscience. For example, how do we sense pain? Then how do you feel mechanical pressure? How do you feel touch? So when they started their work, the circuitry was kind of known. So what was known is that in our peripheral nervous system, that is the neurons or brains, the cells, the nervous system cells, which are present at the periphery of our body, say for example, at our fingertip or at the toe or at our skin or at our face, they receive these informations from outside, from the external environment. And then through different types of neurons, and they're either through a neuron called dorsal root ganglion neurons, they send this information through the spinal cord, and then it goes to the brain or the central nervous system in a cortical region called somatosensory cortex, and then you interpret that the sense that you have got from the external environment. So $1 million question was that when the journey begins, who is basically sensing this information? So for example, if it is a sense of pain, then who is sensing that sense of pain, right? Or if it is a sense of temperature, hot or cold, who is sensing that hotness or coldness? Or if it is a sense of touch, okay, then who is sensing the sense of touch? So that was a question that was unanswered. And David Julius was interested in understanding the pain pathway. Now, historically, the pain biology has been very interesting to not only to neurobiologists, but philosophers and physicians. As you can see, here is a diagram from the great French philosopher René Descartes, which he drew around 1600 or 1700, 16th century or 17th century, where he is basically he hypothesized that this guy, when he's sensing the pain, there is something that is going from the leg towards the brain, and processing is happening in the brain. So in other words, Descartes basically was of the opinion that the sense of pain, although you are feeling it at the periphery of your body, but it is getting processed in the central nervous system or in the brain. And when Julius started his work, it was well known that the pathway that senses the pain at the periphery of your body, they have these dorsal root ganglion neurons. And somehow, something in this dorsal root ganglion neuron senses the feeling of pain and sends that information to the central nervous system or the brain in the somatosensory cortex for the interpretation. So the Julius basically asked the question that who is sensing the pain? Or when the journey is beginning, is there any receptor or any kind of sensor that is present in these neurons at the periphery, or called sensory neurons at the periphery, who is sensing the feeling of pain? So Julius was also interested in understanding the effect of various natural products in the brain. So for him, these two interest, that is understanding the pain pathway as well as understanding the role of various natural products in the brain, they came together. And that was the beauty of his work. So he chose a molecule called capsaicin. So capsaicin is a molecule which is present in a lot of chilies, like all the chili peppers, hot chilies, like red chili, jalapeno, habanero, which are hot peppers. They have this compound called capsaicin. Okay. So Julius decided to use capsaicin to find out who is sensing. So why did he choose capsaicin? Because capsaicin or red chili pepper gives you a burning smell. So it's a burning pain that you experience, right? So what so it was known that when capsaicin touches your tongue, there are neurons in your tongue, the sensory neurons in your tongue, they get activated. So this is a typical electrophysiological recordings from a sensory neuron. Basically, this is called the depolarization of the neuron. So essentially what happens that the ion starts flowing from outside to inside. Okay, the sodium, calcium, these ions starts flowing, and that causes the change in the membrane potential towards the positive direction of the neuron. And so essentially what happens when a neuron gets depolarized, then it fires something called action potential, which is an electrical signal. And that signal gets transported and it goes to the central nervous system for the interpretation. So essentially you are having a chemical that is changing that is causing an electrical change in the neuron, which is present in your tongue. And that electrical impulse is going to the central nervous system or your brain for interpretation, right? So in order to find out that who is sensing this capsaicin, so basically Julius asked whether capsaicin has a binding site in this neuron. Okay, so in order to answer this question, he took a completely structure blind and physiology blind approach. Okay, so he did not make any kind of hypothesis or predisposition about what kind of molecule would be involved, if there is any, in binding capsaicin in the peripheral nervous system or in sensory neurons. So what he did is his lab, from this dorsal root ganglion cells, they made a cDNA library. So they got the mRNAs, all the mRNAs, and made all cDNAs, right? And they got almost 16,000 of them. And then they took a cell line, which usually does not respond to capsaicin, right? So this is a fibroblast cell, which does not respond to capsaicin. So what they did, each of these genes, they put one by one into this cell and then dump capsaicin and ask whether this cell is now responding to capsaicin or not. So the idea is, if you dump a gene and if that non-responsive cell is now responds to capsaicin, that means that this gene, whatever it is coding for the protein, is involved in this process. And as a readout, they took did calcium imaging, because it was known that when capsaicin binds the neuron in your tongue, then you see a calcium rise in this neuron. So they use that to understand or to figure out the protein that is involved in this process. So when they did this experiment, then they stumbled on a protein called, they called it valinoid receptor. Later it was named as TRPV1. It is actually a channel. Okay, so it's a channel. When it binds capsaicin, then it opens, right? The channel opens, and then it's a non-selective cation channel. So basically sodium and calcium flows in, that depolarizes the neuron, and that activity of the neuron, now that electrical signal goes to the brain for interpretation, and you feel the hotness of the chili, right? So this was a remarkable discovery. But then they asked the question that, capsaicin is not there in the body. It's a product that you have added from outside. Now, since this channel is present in the body, it must be having an endogenous ligand. It must be having an endogenous molecule that is activating this channel. So they tried lots of things, different neurotransmitter, different neuropeptides, different things they tried to basically figure out if any one of them is activating this channel or not. And then very interestingly, they found that when when they change the heat, then the channel could open. So heat is another stimulus that can open the channel. So this is a typical, electrophysiology experiment that people do. So this is in a xenopus oocyte. They have expressed that channel, and they are doing a recording called patch clamp recording. And what you see is very interesting, that when you increase the heat, then around 42 to 43 degrees, the channel is opening, where below which you feel it is tolerable heat, but beyond which it becomes very, very difficult to digest, that kind of heat. So this is a threshold around 42 to 43 degree or 44 degree. If you cross that threshold, then the channels open, and then you feel the heat. This is a channel which is not only involved in pain pathway and also sensing the hotness of chili, but it is a heat activated ion channel. So that suggested that through this channel we sense the hotness, or during summer we sense the heat with the help of this channel. So the flip question is, do we have a receptor for sensing cold? Okay, so TRPV1 is a channel that is involved in sensing heat. Do we have a receptor to sense cold? So again, they took the same approach, and now there was a competition between both the Nobel laureate, Julius and Pataputian, and both of them independently, both the labs actually came up with the same channel that senses the cold. Okay, so there are papers which came next to each other almost. So in order to find out the molecule that is sensing cold in our peripheral nervous system, they use now menthol and eucalyptol, because these are cold sensing, right? When we take menthol, we feel cold, right? So they used these natural products to figure out the protein that is involved in sensing the cold, and using the same technique that I just described for TRPV1. And interestingly, they found another TRP channel, so a molecular cousin, you can say, called TRPM8. And what you see here, that when you decrease the temperature, then just look at this green trace. When you decrease the temperature somewhere between 22 to 23 or 27 to 28 degree, below that the channel starts opening. So this is a channel that senses cold, right? So both the groups independently came up with or discovered this channel that is sensing the cold. And so Julius made a knockout mice. So they removed this TRPM8 channel from the mice. And this is a behavioral experiment. Hopefully it will work. Yeah. So what you see, there are two chambers. One chamber is at a temperature of 20 degree, another is at 30 degree. And look at this mice. This is a wild type mice. It does not want to go to the left side because the temperature is cold. So it is sensing the cold. And so since it doesn't like the cold, it is staying at the chamber which is at 30 degree. But now look what is happening with the TRPM8 knockout mice. Again, you have 20 degree and 30 degree. This mice has lost the sensation of cold. It is happily moving towards the 20 degree centigrade chamber because it can't sense the cold, since the channel, the TRPM8 channel, has been removed from this mice, suggesting that this is a channel that senses the cold. Okay. So after this discovery, lots of TRP channels have been identified. Okay, and they work at different temperature range. They are involved in the pain sensation pathway, and also TRP channels are also involved in various other. They are all over the body, and in various other biological processes. Now TRP channels have been implicated. Now, what about the sense of touch? Okay, how do we sense the question of mechanosensation has been in the field for, the interest has been in the field for a very long time. So Adram Pataputian asked the question that how do you sense the feel of touch, and he took a very laborious approach. So he took a cell. So he chose this cell, which is a mouse neuroblastoma cell line. And one of the characteristics of this cell is if you poke the cell, so if you put a mechanical pressure using, say, pipette or something, and you record from that cell, you see a current, meaning that the cell is getting activated. So his lab used this protocol. So they poked the cell and they measured the current that is flowing through the membrane through a patch pipette, okay, by electrophysiology. So what they did, they knock out the genes, they chose around 72 candidate genes, okay, and they knocked them out one by one and asked the question that if I knock out a particular gene, does this cell now respond to this mechanical pressure or not? So it was a very long, it took almost 1.5 years for them to find out a gene. When they knock it out, look at it, this is a normal cell. When you are poking the cell, okay, or putting a pressure, mechanical pressure, the cell is responding. But when they knock down a gene, this response was lost. So then they asked, what does this gene code for? And they came up with a protein, and it's actually an unbelievable protein. This is a very large protein, about 25, it has about 2,500 amino acids, close to 300 kilodalton. It's a membrane protein, obviously, because it is sensing the outside stimulus, and it crosses the membrane 38 times. And this is the largest, transmembrane protein, we have ever known. So they named it as piezo. So it is a Greek word for pressure, okay? And now we know that there are two piezos that are present in human body, piezo 1 and piezo 2, and they are very, very conserved, And this was an extremely exciting discovery. But the trouble was that how to figure out this, how do this, these proteins work? They are so big that crystallography and other things to solve the structure was unsuccessful. So then using cryo-electron microscopy, now we know the structure of this molecule to some extent, and it's a beautiful structure. This is one of the great examples in biology where structure immediately implies the function. So if you look at the structure of this protein, timer, basically 3 piezos come with each other. It's like, 3 hands, if you put like this, they come just like this and form a pore. Structure, they are called blades, okay? And they are on the plasma membrane, suggesting that they are sensing the curvature of the plasma membrane. So how do they work? Now we have the closed conformation of piezo, the structure, by cryo-electron microscopy. We still don't have the structure for open state of piezo, so that's a problem. But now, hopefully, now people have come up with a ligand which can stabilize the open state of piezo. So now probably we will have the open state of piezo as well in next, very soon in next few years. So there is a hypothesis, how does it work? So this is the molecule that is at the membrane. So when there is a pressure on the membrane, these blades, they sense the pressure and they basically come down. So two things probably are happening. They are coming down, and as well as there is a helix, which is called the beam, that goes out. And the action of these two, that coming down of the blade and opening of this beam, opens the channel. And when the channel opens, now the ions can flow in from outside to inside, and then can depolarize the neuron an electrical signal starts, and that goes to the brain for interpretation. There is another hypothesis that some people have put, that probably these blades also rotate. And when they rotate, you open up the pore, and then the ions can flow in. Now, what kind of structural change is usually will happen? Well, we don't know. Hopefully, when we get the open state structure of the channel, we'll be able to know it. And if you again knock out, if you remove this piezo from mice, what you see that the mice which is lacking the piezo is no longer responding to the pressure. So these cells are unable to sense the pressure. So wild type cells, you do see the neuronal activity, but when you in a piezo 2 knockout mice, when you stretch the muscle, the cells are unable to respond, which means that these guys are the sensor for the membrane curvature, tension, as well as the pressure. Okay. So now this would be my last slide almost. So now the piezos are so important. People have found they are present not only in brain, in multiple different areas. For example, they are present in your heart, which is sensing the stretching of the cardiac muscle cell. They're present in the red blood cell, because when the red blood cells flow through the capillaries, the tension of the red blood cell membrane is very, very critical. They're present in the lung, which is sensing the stretching of the alveoli that are present in the lung. They're in the kidney. So they are almost everywhere, and looks like playing a major role in sensing the pressure or tension at the membrane of these cells, and thus controlling the physiology. Okay. And so these two guys, basically Julius identified this channel, which is responsible for sensing the temperature and pain. And Pataputian also got discovered the core channel, but he also discovered the channel which is responsible for sensing the touch and also the proprioception. I didn't go to it in the interest of time. It's basically when you close your eye, you can still touch your nose. So you know exactly where your hand and legs are. So piezo is involved in this process as well. So I'll stop here, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Samarjit, for a great talk, and also for keeping the time. So we have time for a few questions. Questions from audience on Zoom. From YouTube.
Can I ask question?
Sure, Santosh, go ahead. Yeah.
So Samarjit, very nice talk. Thanks. So interesting. I was very happy to see several plants there in the first part of the discovery. I had a question on that part. So like what happens in the very organisms adapted to the very cold and very hot? So are these trip channel expressions or something is known they are lower or higher in, so that they are like not that sensitive and they're adapted to?
Right. So you have now the trip, they are temperature sensors, as I said, and you have so many different trip channels. What has been seen that the animals who are in the, say, for example, very cold regions, say Antarctica or on those places, they actually express a different kind of trip channel. Okay. So you have these trip channels, they have a boundary. So, okay. Through very kind of a narrow boundary on which they work. So you have another kind of trip channel which senses, very cold temperature. So depending on, where you are living, you might be having different kind of trip channel.
Okay, great.
So it's a whole family that has been discovered now.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Any more questions from the audience? Maybe I can ask a question on similar lines as Santosh. So like for individuals who are, so not all individuals are sensitive equally to say chilies, right, or to temperatures. So are there variations in these receptors or number of receptors or signaling downstream?
Well, that has not been carried out. I mean, that was a question, that I saw in a review very recently written by them. And whether, although in some populations in Africa, look like that they have less sensitiveness towards, say, chili. And what has been seen that they have a mutation in one of the TRPV1 channel. Okay, so it is possible that you might have mutations in some of the TRPV channels, right? Whether now, the another thing that could be possible, that the cold and hot channels are, they are exclusively present to two different types of neurons. So they are not co-localized. They are not, one neuron does not express them, right? So which means that hotness and coldness, they are basically, these two informations are going to your brain in a parallel pathway, but then ultimately they are getting mixed in the brain. So you might have a cell number difference, which is sensing the hot and cold population wise. So that has been proposed, but there is no data available.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Amarjeet. So let me again check with other questions from YouTube. So I don't think so. Thank you so much, Amarjeet, once again.
Thanks.
And for a great talk. We'll now move on to the next talk in today's session. So let me invite Dr. Ramashastri, faculty in the Department of Chemical Sciences, to deliver a talk on Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Over to you, Ramashastri.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Rachna. I'll share the screen. Can you please confirm you're able to hear me?
We can see your screen and we can hear you as well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Okay, my time starts now. Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me thank Vijay and Rachna. Of course, my head of the department, Sanjay, for giving this opportunity. I'll talk to you briefly on the science behind the Nobel Prize in Chemistry that was awarded the last year. I tried to put this at a very fundamental level so that non-chemists also possibly can join us and understand the science behind. Just give me a minute. Yeah, the Nobel Prize in 2021 was awarded jointly to Professor Benjamin List from Germany and David Macmillan from US for their work on developing asymmetric organocatalysis. This is the purpose why I highlighted. I'll eventually explain why I did that. Very briefly about the background of these two laureates. Incidentally, both were born in 1968. Of course, one in Germany, other one in Scotland. PhD of Professor List was done in 1997. Of course, on the other hand, Macmillan completed in 96. Professor List joined as a postdoc initially with Professor Carlos Barbas at the Scripps Research Institute, who happens to be my postdoctoral supervisor as well. So we apparently are alumni of the same lab as a postdoctoral fellows. Indeed, there's a connection as of the Nobel Prizes with the Scripps Research Institute, just as Professor Samarjit mentioned, Scripps faculty getting a Nobel Prize in biology. He has some, List also has a Scripps connection. Eventually, he took up tenure track position at Scripps and then moved to Max Planck Institute as a group leader in 2003. Since then, he was there. Even currently, he's at Max Planck Institute for Coal Research as a director. Of course, further details can be found in online sources. On the other hand, Macmillan worked with two great organic chemists. One is Professor Orman during PhD and Professor David Evans as a postdoctoral fellow. He started at University of California, Berkeley, later moved on to Caltech, and currently is a chair professor at Princeton University. Going back to the timeline, there's a purpose why I'm doing this, which you will eventually realize. In 2001, Nobel Prize in Chemistry was awarded in two portions. One to Professor Knowles and Noyori for their work on chirally catalyzed hydrogenation reactions, and to Professor Sharpless, who, by the way, is also a Scripps faculty for his work on chirally catalyzed oxidation reactions. Subsequently, in 2005, Nobel Prize for the metathesis award, the metathesis method in organic synthesis was given to these three gentlemen, Professor Chauvin, Grubbs, and Schock, for their work in metal catalyzed bond reorganization reactions. These metals primarily are ruthenium, tungsten, and molybdenum, for example. Subsequently, in 2010, Chemistry Nobel Prize was awarded to these three men, Heck, Negishi, and Suzuki, for palladium catalyzed cross-coupling reactions in organic synthesis. So what you possibly realize from these 4 Nobel Prizes that were awarded in the last 2 decades is that they just revolve around 2 key topics. That is catalysis and chirality or asymmetry. So you would have seen that, or you would have realized the reason also purposefully highlighted throughout. It also indicates their relevance and their impact on not just from academic point of view, even in industry. These 2 topics or these 2 aspects are extremely important from chemistry point of view. What I'll do before going to the actual topic, I'll very briefly talk to you what is this catalysis and what is this chirality or asymmetry, and then connect to the Nobel Prize 2021. Catalyst, we all know, we must have heard of or would have learned this, that a substance that reduces the activation energy of a process so that a reaction occurs faster or under mild conditions. This can be primarily divided into 2 parts. One is homogeneous catalysis, depending on the nature of the reactants. If the catalyst and reactant or all the reactants are in the same phase, we call that as homogeneous catalysis. On the other hand, if they're in different phases, we call that as heterogeneous, as the name appropriately suggests. Homogeneous catalysis can be further divided into several types: enzyme-based or biocatalysis, organocatalysis, which is what we're going to talk about today, metal catalysis, I already talked to you about this, electrocatalysis, photocatalysis. Okay, what you may ask, why this classification is required, and so what? These catalysis has profound impact. Believe me, this literally drives the industry. Literally is around us. It's actually surrounding us, knowingly or unknowingly. We don't probably realize it, but it exists in several forms. The catalysis in energy processing, bulk chemical synthesis, fine chemical synthesis, food processing, and others. Metal catalysis, as I just introduced to you, already fetched 3 Nobel Prizes. And on the other hand, organocatalysis is something that we're going to talk about, the field that was awarded Nobel Prize last year. Of course, personally, I believe that photocatalysis is probably in line. Now, coming to chirality, as I told, the second word or second topic in one of my earlier slides. What is this chirality? As the name chirality, it refers to handedness. Handedness directly related to our hands. Okay, as the figure there suggests, okay, if you try to put one hand on the other, you can see that they're not superimposed. Okay, this is effectively what is the science behind chirality. Just as our hands, this is for the understanding sake, not necessarily science I'm talking now. Just as our hand has fingers of different sizes, whenever a carbon is connected to 4 different groups, that is where we call a stereogenic center. That is where, or that is what is the source of what is so-called chirality or enantiomerism. Here I've taken a simple example of alanine, which has 4 different groups. As you see, it can exist in 2 different enantiomeric forms, one L-alanine, D-alanine, or otherwise in absolute terms, it can be called S enantiomer and R enantiomer. So effectively, chirality is when a molecule exhibits two non-superimposable mirror images, and those two mirror images are those what we call as enantiomers. You may be wondering, or some of you who may not be familiar with this topic may be wondering, this seems to be a very simple topic, but let me tell you, this literally drives the entire research, entire industry as well. As I told you, one of the utmost these are often different physical, chemical, and even biological properties. So that's the primary reason. Okay, now coming to further understanding what is these chiral molecules. We are built up of, and the drivers and DNA that is within us, they're all chiral molecules. Okay, even natural products. Professor Samajit already talked something about natural products and their importance. Several of them indeed are chiral because they originate through several enzymatic processes. Enzymes, as I said, are chiral in nature. Drugs that we take, I mean to say medicines. Okay, several of them possess at least one chiral center. Some of them are listed. These are not obviously the exhaustive list. So you can see that these molecules have different properties, and these properties can change significantly depending on the chiral nature of these molecules. Okay, next question comes, how to introduce chirality? Nature does this very easily. As I said, it has its own tools in the form of enzymes. How chemically this can be done? This can be done in different ways that are listed here. Substrate controlled, chiral induction, auxiliary control, reagent control, but the most popular one is catalyst control. As you talk of catalyst controlled synthesis, this can be further divided into three primary modes of catalysis. One is metal catalysis, biocatalysis, that is enzyme mediated catalysis. Other one is organic catalysis, which is the interest of today's topic. While these three have their own advantages and of course at the same time disadvantages, no method is unique, no method is universal. So every of these methods have their significances and drawbacks as well. Some of them are listed here. I don't go through necessarily everything in the interest of time, but otherwise organic catalysis is something, because we're going to talk about today, I'll elaborate on this. What is organic catalysis? As if you start questioning, this is the catalysis of small organic molecules composed of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. And what is the advantage? They're usually robust, inexpensive, readily available. Just as I mentioned, some of the examples I'm going to show you also. And primary advantage is non-toxic. Another significant advantage, being an organic chemist especially, is that they're inert towards moisture and oxygen mostly, and that gives an edge whenever you're pursuing a chemical transformation. Further, this particular aspect is especially important in pharmaceutical sense, because pharmaceuticals in pharmaceutical setups, as you can understand, cannot tolerate metal contamination. These are some of the representative examples of organic molecules typically employed as organic catalysts in synthesis. So you can see some of them are natural products, naturally occurring, some of them are modified. Okay, you can see proline, quinine, for example. These are naturally occurring materials. These are artificial, otherwise synthesized molecules. And believe me, the two molecules that are highlighted here, that is proline and this oxazolidine, are the ones that fetched, in this case, for example, proline fetched Nobel Prize to Professor List, and this molecule fetched Nobel Prize to Professor Macmillan. You will see how it was done, of course, in brief. So now connecting directly to the Nobel Prize 2021, nature employs aldolases. These are enzymes to manufacture carbon-carbon bonds through what is so-called aldol reaction. how this is done. Through the efforts of Professor Barbers and Professor Lerner, what was realized was that aldolases in their active site contain lysine residue. As you see here, it has an amino group at the end that now reacts with a donor molecule. In this case, of course, for example, say if I took acetone as an example, forms iminium ion that subsequently undergoes isomerization to this enamine, which eventually, being nucleophilic, reacts with an acceptor molecule situated in the environment and manufactures an aldol product. Eventually, this imine hydrolyzes to release the product. This is what nature does. This was proved, or this was evidenced through extensive studies from Barbers' group. As I said earlier, List was a postdoc with Barbers, and he worked in this field, and he got some hints from how these aldolases are actually accomplishing the carbon-carbon bond formation using these amino acids as the key components. Based on that, he started screening different amines and amino acids available readily on bench. And this is the pioneering discovery that List made in collaboration with Lerner and Barbers in the year 2000. And please take note of the date or the month. There is a purpose. I'll get back to this. This was in February 2000. This work was published. This reaction involves proline catalyzed. Let me tell you, this proline is same as what biologists or chemists know, and others also know as an essential amino acid. This also works out as a catalyst in chemical transformations. Now that proline catalyzes this reaction to obtain this particular product in very good enantiomer selectivity. Okay, this topic I introduced earlier, what is chirality? That means this molecule is now chiral. Okay, this is what is an aldol reaction which is done by nature in enzymatic setup. This is what is now done under chemical environment. This concept subsequently was evaluated in different other reactions such as Manic reaction, Michael reaction, and others. I'll come to that very briefly. But I would like to draw your attention to this particular sentence that was mentioned by List in this particular paper. The development of aldolase antibodies that use enamine mechanism and accept hydrophobic organic substrates demonstrated potential in amine catalyzed asymmetric aldol reaction. What is the essence of this is that just as how the aldolases performed or were demonstrated by Barbers group, as you can see, reference 4 is this particular Barbers group in reacting through enamine mechanism with different hydrophobic organic substrates. Now this was translated in chemical environment to amine catalyzed asymmetric aldol reactions. That's what the essence of that particular statement. This clearly tells how much Barbers' contributions were, or Lerner's contributions impacted List's discovery. This was a mechanism. Of course, I don't get into all the details, but what is important in this particular mechanism is this particular transition state. Because the product was chiral, what was responsible for the induction of chirality? Obviously, this kind of transition states chemists regularly go through to visualize, as an envision, the supramolecular assembly. I mean to say, at a molecular level, how the catalysts and the substrate organize themselves and eventually translate to product. And in this instance, translate to a chiral product, that is this one. Okay, this was proposed based on a metal-free Zimmermann-Traxler transition state, and this was eventually validated by Hauck, a famous computational chemist from UCLA, via this tricyclic hydrogen bonded framework. As I told you earlier, this was not just limited to aldol reaction. This was also accomplished under manic conditions. As you can see, this is an example of a 3-component manic reaction giving this product in excellent enantiomer selectivity. This was the paper published by Liz. And then this was the transition state proposed, how this was complementary to the aldol product is something that was explained by this particular transition state, how the C-selectivity, C-phase selectivity that I showed earlier in aldol reaction is reversed, as in this case, the reselectivity is explained by this transition state. I don't get into further details, but otherwise, this concept was also extended to Michael reaction and several other reactions, several complicated reactions. Just for the sake of time and not to confuse you with many details, I'm just putting it as simple as possible. You can see this is also a contribution from List. Now comes into picture Macmillan with his contribution. There is a purpose, as I told you earlier. I asked you to take note of the date that it is published. That was List paper was published in February 2000. As you see here, Macmillan came up with his work in April 2000. It's hardly a difference of 2 months in the same year. Okay, his work was based on a phenylalanine derived. This is also amino acid based catalyst. That is this particular catalyst. You can possibly see a phenylalanine in this. This is a modified version of it, and this finds extensive applications in cycloaddition reactions. In this instance, Macmillan demonstrated the utilization of this particular catalyst in Diels-Alder reaction, obtained this product in excellent NH selectivity as well as exo-endo selectivity. Okay, so what is the thinking behind this discovery? So Macmillan thought that just as the Lewis acids activate carbonyls, he envisioned that the iminium activation in the form of this iminium ion can also exert similar perturbance as of the homo-lumo interactions are concerned. I'm using certain keywords. Please don't be worried about it, but I need to use them in order to convey a proper message. But in an effort to properly tune the homo-lumo distance and accomplish the reaction, he utilized this catalyst, and this catalyst effectively forms iminium ion with this particular enal or this aldehyde functionality, and subsequently undergoes highly endoselective Diels-Alder process. This is the origin of the stereo selectivity in this process. This particular benzyl group here, as you see here, the CH2PH group here, effectively shields one anisotropic phase. It's effectively shielding one anisotropic phase, thereby making available only one phase, that is the C phase, available, and that is what is made responsible, that is what is considered responsible for the high NHO induction as well as endofacial selectivity as of this particular reaction. This concept subsequently, just as List extended the aldol chemistry to Michael processes and others, this concept subsequently was demonstrated in several other cycloaddition reactions. For example, if you see, this is an example of a 3+2 cycloaddition reaction, that is 1,3-dipolar cycloaddition reaction, giving the exo-endo products an excellent NHO selectivities and endo-exo selectivity. This is published by Macmillan, and this was a Mokayama-Michael reaction published by the same group. Of course, I'm picking only the contributions from only Macmillan. Of course, several other researchers also contributed eventually after their initial discovery in 2000. You can see here, this is an example of a Mokayama-Michael reaction, which gave access to this particular key fragment elaborated to the synthesis of natural product such as this. Okay. Industrially, obviously, these works have great implication. As you see here, Merck currently uses this enamine promoted manic process in an effort to manufacture this DPP4 inhibitor in large scales. You can, large scale, I don't mean to say grams or kilos, they make it in tons, literally tons. And you can see here, this is employing iminium catalysis. That is a Michael addition reaction was accomplished. This also is an example of a multi-ton scale synthesis by Merck in synthesizing this telcagepant. Okay, this is another drug that is currently in market. More details can be found, of course, from this particular reference that is cited here. So I would conclude by the very short details that I've provided. A third parallel in catalysis was established. Third parallel means what are two? That is metal catalysis and biocatalysis. Now, third parallel is organocatalysis that was established through the Nobel contributions by List and Macmillan. The advantages of organocatalysis obviously are it is first metal free, and most of them are readily available chiral pool materials. Okay. On the other hand, this technology has been widely utilized in new method development, new natural product synthesis, and also in the manufacturing of several pharmaceuticals. Indeed, several Indian chemists also contributed to organocatalysis. Okay, first in line is Professor Vinod Singh, who actually, to my understanding, brought organocatalysis to Indian scientific scenario. Other chemists, of course, there are several other prominent chemists who worked in this field eventually, especially from Indian context. These were nicely summarized in this particular article. Anyone interested can go through, otherwise I can also supply. We also, to a certain extent, work in organocatalysis. Our organocatalysis, of course, not based on amines or amino acids. We work in phosphine catalyzed transformations. One can find those details from our webpage. With this, I conclude my talk. I had the great opportunity to meet Professor List on a couple of occasions during conferences. This is one of those pictures taken during a conference in Hyderabad. I thank again Vijay, Rachna, and of course Sanjay for giving me this opportunity. I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ramashastri. So we have time for a few questions. Any questions from participants who have joined through Zoom?
So can I just ask a simple?
Sure.
Ram, it was a really nice talk. Just when I just look at this, the contributions. So there is some kind of too much of similarity is there. For example, both the research work, it's related to covalent organocatalysis. That's right?
Right.
So one, I think the Professor Benjamin List's contribution is related to the increasing the HOMO of the nucleophile. Is that correct?
Right. And when actually, I have that slide. I thought, sorry. I thought I exceed the time. I deleted that, but otherwise I had. Anyway, please complete the question.
Yeah. And Macmillan's contribution is related to the lowering of the electrophile. Is that correct? So that in both the ways, you can just decrease the energy of the starting material, and the coupling partner, right? Okay.
Right. Yeah, as you rightly pointed out, I also purposefully mentioned this is enamine catalysis. Enamine catalysis, as you know, involves homorizing activity, and on the other hand, iminium catalysis involves LOMO, lowering activity, and that defines how the particular intermediate reacts eventually, whether with nucleophile or an electrophile. Right. Yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions from Zoom? There are a couple of questions from YouTube from Priya. So the first question is, does proline catalyze only the substrate that you showed, or all substrates that have keto and aldehyde groups?
Right. Yeah, it's not just limited to what the substrate I have shown. Yes, as she rightly said, substrates possessing ketones and aldehydes preferentially react. Of course, I should rather put it the other way. Any substrate that can form imine and enamine can be fit into this particular subject.
Okay.
Because not all carbonyl containing molecules can react. For example, esters, acids also have carbonyl, but they don't react, or they don't form imines and enamines. So So limitation, as I also told, not all methods are universal. The limitation of this work is that they're limited to ketones, aldehyde substrates.
Another question from Priya is that, was transition state confirmed using computational chemistry or any other technique as well?
Right. Yeah, transition states were confirmed. Presentation is still live. References also cited. Otherwise, I can also supply if some dystopia she wants or anyone else require. Identification won't be usually feasible relation or whatever. So computation.
I'm facing some connectivity issues. Is the issue with others as well?
Am I audible? No.
Your voice was breaking. I don't know whether it was from my end or.
Yeah, it was for me as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry. Okay. I hope my talk at least went well.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
that
know.
was totally fine. At least for me, that was totally perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So are there any more questions from YouTube? I don't think so. So if there are no more questions, let's thank Dr. Ramashastri again for a great talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Now the talk on Nobel Prize in Physics will be delivered jointly by Dr. Abhishek Chaudhary from the Department of Physical Sciences and Dr. Raju Atara from the Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences. I would like to invite them to give a talk. Abhishek, over to you.
Yeah.
Your slides are visible, Abhishek.
Slides are visible? Okay. Just let me. For some reason it is making it problematic for me. Sorry, I will just stop the sharing. Okay. I guess some problems in my laptop, but I'll have to.
We can see that the slides are getting changed. So
I don't. Just give me 1 minute.
No problem.
I can't do the. I can't see my cursor. That's a problem. I guess it's a. Rachna, can you just force unshare for me? I can't. It's just hung, I think. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. Actually, I don't see your screen, so I don't know how to unshare.
Okay, maybe I'll just, I mean, I can, at least I can change my screen. So I'm just hoping that should work, because I can't see I was just worried that I can't use my cursor, but that's okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the Nobel Prize.
Can I just interrupt? So I cannot see your screen. I don't know whether others are able to see your screen.
No, we can't see it now.
Okay. So this is the problem. It's just
earlier we could see the screen.
have no clue what is going on suddenly. Okay. Can you see my screen now? No?
No, not yet, Abhishek.
The problem is I can't stop share as well. That's an issue. I don't know what is.
You can force quit and restart.
Yeah.
Abhishek, in the meantime, can we start with Dr. Raju Atada, or it has to go in a particular sequence? Now I can't hear Abhishek. Can people hear me?
No, I think he disconnected to reconnect.
Okay.
We can hear you, but if he continues to have a problem, maybe we can switch the order.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So if Dr. Raju Atada can share his screen in the meantime, then.
Yes.
So we can see your screen and it's changing as well, the slides. Yeah, so all set.
Great. Can I start now?
Sure.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Rachna and Dr. Vijay, and our head of the department, Professor Abel Sinha, and other organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk on Physics Nobel Prize in 2021 for the climate science contributions. So this year, the half of the prize is awarded to Professor Giorgio Parisi, and the other half is to Siku Manabe and Professor Klaus Hasselmann. So Dr. Abhishek is going to talk about Giorgio's Parisi's contributions. I will mostly focus on the Professor Manabe and Professor Hasselmann's contributions. Okay, so Professor Manabe showed us how and why increased CO2 concentrations leads to global warming, and Hasselmann showed that it is happening. So this is the short contribution, short line for the important contributions in the climate sciences. So they got this Nobel Prize for the physical modeling of physical modeling of the Earth's climate, quantifying variability and reliably predicting global warming in the backdrop of complexity of planetary scales. So Professor Manabe is from GFDL, Princeton is a faculty member. So he made significant landmark contributions on wide range of climate topics, including the development of three-dimensional models and quantifying the effect of greenhouse gases on Earth's climate. And also he elucidated the atmospheric radiative convective equilibrium, and also monsoon modeling and influence of orography on climates at different parts of the world, and many more. So in this talk, I mostly focus on most of his Nobel Prize winning work that he has done in 1960s and early 70s. Okay, so this is this is Professor Manabe has developed a great climate model with a simple concepts. So it is radiative convective equilibrium model. It has now become Manabe's climate model. So for the climate, as climate, sun is the main source of energy. So the sun always emits the incoming radiation at shorter wavelengths, roughly 100 nanometers to 4 micrometers, and some of the energy reflected back to the space, that is what we call albedo, and some of the 70% of the energy absorbed by the Earth's surface. So now Earth surface behaves almost like a black body. Whatever it absorbs, it has to emit according to the Kirchhoff's law. So it emits the radiation, but at longer wavelengths, between 4 micrometers to 100 micrometers or so. So this energy, the observed energy and then emitted energy, what actually dictates the surface temperature of the Earth's surface. So, but we have the atmosphere. Atmosphere has mixed different gases like permanent gases and variable gases like CO2 and water vapor, nitrous oxide, and so these gases basically allows the shortwave radiation. Look at the spectrum here, but it can absorb the most of the long-wave radiation. So this water vapor, for example, water vapor gas. So this is absorption spectrum of the water vapor. This is for carbon dioxide. So, and whatever it absorbs, again, it emits the energy as in long-wave radiation towards the surface, and some of the energy also emits back to space. This excess energy is basically has to be balanced by the some process that is what we call convection. So Professor Manabe has introduced this convection by considering the atmosphere, by considering the thermals. So basically, when we warm the temperature with this radiation, so warmer air becomes less denser and then tries to rise up, and then it removes the excess energy at the surface and redistributes through the deeper layers of the atmosphere. In addition to that, so this warm air thermals is actually also transports the water vapor content from the surface to upward and condenses, and as a transition takes place, and then latent heat releases. So this latent heat further warms the atmosphere. So this is what Professor Manabe explored back then of the interaction between radiation balance and convection. This is the very important model in explaining the thermal equilibrium of the atmosphere and understanding the global warming mechanism. So coming to some calculations of radiative equilibrium in order to get the heat balance of the Earth's atmosphere. So incoming solar radiation should balance by the outgoing normal radiation. So S naught is the energy that is received by the Earth, and this is the reflection energy. It's about 30%, and this is the outgoing normal radiation that is emitted by the Earth's surface. So by plugging these values and consider that there is no atmosphere, then the effective temperature of the Earth's surface would be 5 Kelvin, which is below freezing level. That is the case. So the Earth's surface would be like a snowball where there is no the light cannot be adjusted. But the current the global mean surface temperature is about 288. The difference between this is about 33 elements, which is basically coming from the natural greenhouse gas effect. Okay. So these natural greenhouse gases absorb the radiation. The slide. So it emits the infrared radiation towards the Earth's surface and keeps the warmer. Okay, so this is how we could explain the global warming and accurate Earth's surface temperatures. And he also used effective adjustment model, a one-dimensional model, in order to explain the thermal structure of the atmosphere. What he did is that, so he used two different states. One is radiative state, other one is radiative convective state. So he in order to account the convection, so he has taken two radiation. One is the fixed relative humidity. Basically, fixed relative humidity is what explains that so whereas absolute humidity is the actual water content. You fix the absolute humidity, you cannot change the water content in the atmosphere. Then in that case, in the radiative state, the temperature falls so fast, it exceeds almost so states, which is about. And in the case of fixed relative So, but in the case of convective equipment with fixed relative humidity, he could be able to derive the structure of the atmosphere very close to the observations. So, where the lab fit is about 6 months. So, this is what we have done. Okay, so as we know that we are continuously conditions and translation. Last one will change translations and so back then he knows that and he wrote
Dr. Raju, I think there is some problem with the audio. I don't know whether everyone is facing that or.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not able to hear properly.
Okay, so how about this now?
Now it is better.
It's better?
Yeah.
It's better.
Okay. So yeah, so back then he wrote a paper in Journal of Atmospheric Sciences Journal. Atmosphere.
No, it's still not clear.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yeah, now it's better. Now it's fine.
But there is some echo at the back. So I'm not able to hear clearly.
Okay, so is it okay now?
Yes, to me it looks okay now.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So in this paper, so they have done 2 different experiments. One is it is believed that everything is basically driven by the solar radiation. Solar radiation. So what we started with solar radiations from the lower values to the values in order to see the temperature. So the observed solar constant is about 1.96 Langley per minute. But when we change the radiation from the lower layer, the atmosphere temperature is also increasing the surface. So, and then other experiment, what he did is that he doubled the CO2, right? And this is base concentrations, and he made it more on the base, and then he derived the simulated the temperature. So what he could notice is that when we CO2 increases, there is a 2.3 degrees.
Dr. Raju, there still seems to be audio issues.
Let me check my Hello?
Yeah, now it's better. We can just.
Okay.
Test it while speaking, because when you say hello, it works.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this paper, when they increase the CO2 concentrations, the temperature and the surface increased to 3 degrees centigrade, and then also this temperature not only at the surface but entire troposphere. So the second, but in the stratosphere, the concentrations, stratospheric temperatures is so he concluded that when you increase the CO2 concentrations, so trap the infrared radiation and it goes back and warm the atmosphere as well as the surface. But in the stratosphere, so basically CO2 emits the heat radiation when we increase the carbon dioxide, it emits a larger energy towards the space than what it is getting from the below. So more output and less input, so that with the negative net emission loss. So that is the main reason stratospheric cooling temperatures increased. So then how does recently they had a survey, and then others researchers across the world. So they ranked this paper as the most influential climate change paper. These two.
Sorry to interrupt. Still, your voice is not very clear. There is some kind of audio issues there. Still, your voice is not very.
Is that okay now?
Please go on. Go on.
So so how does that stand up now? So look at the recent temperature trends from the remote sensing observations. So this is cross sections from the south poles to north poles. Gray line indicates the troposphere. So most of the atmosphere gets warmer, and then the stratosphere is cooler. Even this is true for global averaged profiles. These are the trends basically. So you can see, so whatever he demonstrated in 1967, 57 years ago, so this is what is happening now. So he could, using the simple models, he could also demonstrated the effects of various factors and it's on the structure. So with only solar radiation and structure is not possible to explain, but if you include all the factors, and it is possible to explain this temperature change in troposphere as well as the stratosphere. Okay, so he also investigated the influence of the water vapor feedback on the temperature change. So water vapor feedback is basically when you increase the greenhouse gases, there is increase in temperature according to the classical law. So every 1 degree rise in the surface atmospheric temperature, it can hold 7% extra moisture that can. So the water vapor is also very important greenhouse gas, where it can absorb and emit the radiation, and it warms the atmosphere as well as the surface. So it's a positive feedback. More greenhouse gases, more temperature, more vapor, and more warmth. So we use this feedback and to try to quantify the impact of how this contributing. So with water vapor feedback, so there is a 2.3 degrees change in the temperature at the surface, but without the water vapor feedback, it is just 1.3 degrees centigrade. So it is very clear that water vapor is actually a very important tool that magnifies the surface temperature by a factor of 1.8 times. So and also he investigated in 1970s, investigated how this increasing the greenhouse gases can impact the hydrological cycle. So the important message from this paper is that increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere can lead to more surface temperature, and then more evaporation. Enough conducive conditions to trigger the convection, we can get the increasing precipitation all over. So it is happening everywhere now, including our India. There is a recent paper that suggested that our central Indian region, that is basically monsoon poor region, where we get more rainfall. So the number of extreme precipitation events are increasing 3 times compared to 1950s. So those one-dimensional models now become 3-dimensional model. We joined with Brian, who is an oceanographer, So they coupled the full atmospheric model by using the primitive equations, and it also coupled with the land and ocean to derive the entire climate, surface climate. They also using this climate to solve the grid point both horizontally as well as vertically. So and then later, approximately at 1970s, Professor Klaus Hasselmann he developed some stochastic models where they can link together the climate. Weather is basically short-scale phenomenon, but it's very chaotic, whereas climate is long-term average conditions of the atmosphere. So he developed the aquatic models in order to identify the fingerprints that basically comes from both the natural phenomena as well as human activities that bring to the climate. So he developed simple models where the memory of the computer is about half megabyte, which is way less than today's mobile memory. So so this is the temperature change using those models. It is the temperature change. Black line is the temperature trend. And in these models, they first started with the natural factors where the volcanic eruptions are included, and then try to simulate the temperature climate. So the temperature is almost, there's no change for the last 100 years. But when included the natural factors plus with human influence of factors, such as fuel and so he could able to track, he could able to fit this trend with the absolute temperature trend. So so they concluded that human influence has warmed the climate at the rate that is really unprecedented. So and it is not only at the past but in the future, if you continuously emit the CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere, what we're going to get, and it is going to be much worse in terms of radiative forcing and the low temperatures. So this is the report. This is the image taken from the IISER Interpanel Commenting on Climate Change report. What they suggest that there is, compared to the second half of the 19th century, the recent decade is much warmer, and then there is 1.2 degree forcing state, temperature rising state, which is basically using those Hasselmann's model. It's possible to differentiate it. So the human influence can cause to 1.1 degree, but along with greenhouse gases, it is factors. It is about 1.5 degree, and fortunately, there are small particles which emit in the atmosphere in terms of aerosols. That is, aerosols can reflect the solar radiation and reflect the solar radiation and cools down the Earth's surface. So overall, it accounts the observed. So now these models are useful to simulate past climate and also project the future climate with the same idea that was demonstrated by Professor Mohali and Professor. So in short, so Mohali's contributions in terms of simple conceptual models and one-dimensional models, and Mohali's and also Hasselmann's stochastic models, recent IPCC report concluded that it is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land, and it causes widespread and rapid changes in the atmosphere, ocean, biosphere, and it is going to occur in the future. Business. With this, I stop. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Raju Tara, for the talk. So we'll move on to the talk by Dr. Abhishek Chaudhary and have questions collectively after that. I hope that's okay.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So Abhishek, if you could please share your slides.
So the point is, I think I cannot share my slide.
No, you can. You just try it once, Abhishek.
I can. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I think I can do that now. Share. I hope this is now visible to everyone.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, visible. Yeah.
Good. This is the thing that, but the moment I do a full screen mode, I cannot use my Anyway, I think it's fair to say that we are, both me and Raju have been facing difficulties with dealing with complex systems, with these complex systems. So let's start. I'm sorry for the previous, issue that had come up with the screen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2021, which was shared between Sayoko Manabe, Klaus Hasselmann, and Giorgio Parisi. The citation of this reads the following, that this was awarded for groundbreaking contributions to our understanding of complex systems, half of which was jointly given to Sukuro Manabe and Klaus Hasselmann for the physical modeling of Earth's climate, quantifying variability and reliably predicting global warming, which Dr. Atada has spoken just before me. And the other half was to Giorgio Parisi for the discovery of the interplay of disorder and fluctuations in physical systems from atomic to planetary scales. And now this is the part of the work which I am going to focus on in the lecture now. So let me go directly to the works of Giorgio Parisi, and it's talking about Parisi's work is actually an unenviable task. He has done an enormous amount of work in physics, which include, of course, replica symmetry breaking in spin glasses, which is a kind of the disordered systems, and which was being talked about in the citation, which is the interplay of disorder and fluctuations. Then, of course, there is this DGLAP equation in quantum chromodynamics, which I know nothing about. I know quite a lot about the Kardar-Parisi-Zhang equation to describe interfaces, and I could have stuck to this to talk about it because I have myself worked on interfaces which belong to the what is called the Kardar-Parisi-Zhang universality class. However, given the fact that it is the citation or the work for which Giorgio Parisi has predominantly for which he has got this Nobel Prize was about the discoveries about how apparently random phenomena are governed by hidden rules, which was done in around 1980. And his work is now considered to be among the most important contributions to the theory of complex systems. This basically has to deal with spin glasses and replica symmetry breaking. It's a humongous, and it's like a very large subject, and we have very little time, so I'll be brief and maybe not so much coherent, but I hope that you will be able to at least appreciate the work that was done. Now, when we talk about condensed matter, we are always talking about things like phase transitions, and phase transitions. For instance, we can talk about the transition from water to ice, or from one magnetic state to another magnetic state. And the natural question to ask there is, what is it that characterizes the phase of such systems? So what characterizes water, for instance, or what characterizes ice? And this is basically in the kind of things that we say when we talk about phase transitions, is that there is something called an order parameter which quantifies these different phases. And now when you look at this order parameter across phase transition, so let's say if you're varying temperature or something like that, and then the value of this order parameter will change from one phase to another, and this is going to be a signature of the phase transition. Of course, it doesn't tell you what type of phase transition. For that, you have to do much other stuff. Of course, there is a question about symmetry breaking here, because you are, that from, when you go from water to ice, you are, there is a lowering of symmetry. And so the question is, what is that in different situations? And so this brings us to spin glass. And now the spin glasses are what are called magnetic systems. And they have internal magnetic moment. So when you, this internal magnetic moments can be modeled as, so they have the internal magnetic moments. So you can think of this as being on a, these kind of systems be presented as on a lattice, and they have, at least lattice side, you give a particular, a spin with certain direction, basically unit vector, which can point anywhere. And so these are you think about them as classical spins pointing in different directions space. Now, in the spin glass systems, what happens is that the interactions between the magnetic moments are found to be in conflict with each other, and we'll talk about what it means. There's something which is called the frozen in structural disorder. Okay, Now, examples of such systems are, noble metals, which are weakly diluted with transition metal ions. And so, for instance, you can have a system like, which I will be talking in the next stage, which is like copper manganese. These kind of systems are what are called spin glass systems, because in what you find experimentally is that they do not show any conventional long-ranged order. And I'll again qualify what I mean by ferromagnetic and antiferromagnetic order. As I said, systems exhibit a freezing transition to a state with a new kind of order. Spins are aligned in random directions. So the question is, what is the order parameter for spin glasses? Is there a broken symmetry? So all the questions that you would ask when you're talking about phase transitions are the questions that you are going to ask in this kind of systems. Of course, there's a big question about how to deal with statistical mechanics of a system with large number of quenched variables. Quenched variable, I mean, these are like, spins which are at, anyway, so maybe I'll just go ahead and talk about it. So, so this is, as I said, this is an experimental picture of copper manganese system, where if you basically, so what you're looking at here is this what is it called, the susceptibility as a function of temperature. Now, susceptibility as a function of temperature is something which is often these are kind of things, these are response functions, and these are the kind of things that you look at when you have to talk about a phase transition. And clearly what you can see here is that, I'm sorry, I cannot use my cursor for the reasons as I said before, but what you could, if I when you go from the higher temperature and you're lowering the temperature, and you can see that the susceptibility goes up. Okay, and this going up is a behavior which is called 1/T behavior. Which is a well understood behavior. And then after below a certain temperature, and then you can see that there is a drop again. So there is to be this is just like a cusp in the magnetic susceptibility, which is a typical of a phase transition kind of a behavior. Of course, what type of phase transition it is again a very crucial question, because what has been known, I mean, there have been several experiments which have been done that these do not show any long-ranged, as I said before, ferromagnetic or antiferromagnetic order, and this is the kind of behavior that you see. And the question is, what is going on here? There are different things about the peak being dependent upon the frequency. This is an AC susceptibility measurement, and so that is one of the things that is crucial. That's the other part of the plot, but maybe we can skip that. Okay, so we have established that in spin glass systems you can see some sort of a what quote unquote phase transition. The question is, what is that? So this is something which I have already talked about. So in order to describe, as I said, to describe the system, we shall talk about what is called the Ising model, which describes which is also called the Drosophila of statistical physics. Just like Drosophila is stuff which you always use in biology. It's the same thing here as well. So this Ising model, which you can see here, is basically what you do is basically think about this as a have a lattice system where every site will have a have a spin which can point. The Heisenberg model tells you the spin can point in any whatsoever direction. It's a unit vector pointing in any what direction. The Ising model is a more restricted one, where you say that this spins instead of this spin SI, you replace it with some sigma which can take values of plus and minus 1, so it can point either up or down. So this like something like that. And what you can see is that there's Jij, which is which is basically the interaction between these spins. And depending upon what is the kind of interaction that you choose, you can get different states, okay, of the system. The other part of that Hamiltonian is basically, you can have on top of this system, you can have some sort of a field, and that field will obviously, bias the system in one way or the other. Now, what we can do is to forget about that biased part and think about a very simple situation where the Gij is a constant and it can be taken out of that summation. So if it's greater than 0, so it's what we call as a ferromagnetic model. And so if in such a situation, if you evolve the system, what you find is that there is a so above a critical temperature, you find that the spins can be in whatsoever directions. I mean, I should qualify it because it's not quite correct, because when we talk about the Ising model, it can only point I mean, it can only take values of plus and minus 1. So the picture is a bit, is not quite correct because it's showing spins in all whatsoever directions, but you can get the idea that it can point there is no one direction that it chooses, unlike in the ferromagnetic phase, which happens at a temperature lower than the critical temperature. And then you can talk about a overall magnetization of the system, and you see that the overall magnetization of the system, which is an average over the spins over all the lattice sites, that is 0 in the paramagnetic phase, where it is non-zero in the ferromagnetic phase. And we say that there is a ordering. I mean, so there's a paramagnetic to ferromagnetic phase transition. This is if you had J to be negative, then we would get what is called the anti-ferromagnetic ordering. Okay, so this is what we will use. So this is the Ising model, is the one model which we will use for describing what Parisi will talk about for these disordered systems. The Ising spins on a regular lattice with nearest neighbor interaction. So as I said, in the spin glass systems, what we are going to assume is that the interactions that we were chosen between the sites, they are actually random interactions. So basically, this randomness is both in their values and is in their signs. Okay, so if you do that, then what you can show is that there is no long-ranged paramagnetic or ferromagnetic or antiferromagnetic phase. What you see is that there is of course a high temperature. When you go to higher temperatures, you get a paramagnetic phase, which is the same as what we had talked about before, where if you average over the sigma in a site, then that goes to 0. The overall magnetization is also 0. What you also see is a very interesting thing, that at a lower temperature, this is called what is called the Edwards-Anderson model. The first model to kind of talk about description of theoretically describing this spin glass systems. So what you see is that at a lower temperature, what you find is that although the overall magnetization is still 0, you see that if you look at individual sites and you average over this sigma and you get the average of sigma I, then you will find that that is not non-zero. So essentially, it is like saying that these spins have found out some directions in these different sites, and they are like as if they are pointing there, and they will stay there with this kind of directions. And this is what the situation, basically what the situation we are talking about. Okay. But then then obviously this magnetization, which used to be a good order parameter for the anti-paramagnetic ferromagnetic phase transition, is no longer a good order parameter, because obviously in both things you will see that the value of m is equal to 0. What turns out to be a good order parameter for the system in this case is the squared of the sigma I squared, which is easy to see because obviously you can see that this q value that you have is 0 in the paramagnetic phase, but is non-zero in the other phase, which we are now going to call as a spin glass phase, where these spins are as if frozen in this on this lattice. Okay. Okay, so moving forward, if you now calculate you can do some calculations and calculate the susceptibility, you can see that it has a behavior which is 1 minus q by t. Q, remember, takes the values of 0 and 1 depending upon which phase you are in, and you can easily see that below the critical, not 1, 0 and 1, I'm just saying that if q is less than, so if q is 0 when you have when you are in the paramagnetic phase, which is above the temperature, above the TF, which you can see in this, which is marked in that experimental plot, and there you see that when Q is 0, the chi goes as 1 over T, which is a behavior that is seen in this susceptibility. When Q is less than when you are less than that critical when the critical temperature, then you have Q to be you have chi to be going down again, and so you can explain the cusp, but it is not. I mean, although this does this, but there is more to it in the spin glass systems, and I'm going to quickly now talk about what happens. So the kind of interactions we have talked about are quench interactions. So any concrete sample, these interactions are fixed to begin. When you start the system, it's fixed, and this results in what are called frustrations in the system. Okay. How do I explain that frustration? You can see this spin triangular situation that you have. So let us assume that that all interactions are equal in their values with the difference only in their signs. Now, if the three interactions, so 1, 2, 3 that we are talking about, so in one case I will have a J12 and I'll have a J23 and I'll have a J13. All of these happen to be positive, then the ground state of this spin system will be unique. Okay? It can also be that if you have 2 negative and 1 positive, even then you can show that the ground state of the system is unique. You will pick up only one possible situation. However, if the product of these interactions along the triangle, okay, they happen to be negative. So if you have one of the interactions negative or all 3 interactions negative, then the ground state of the system is said to be what is called degenerate. Okay. So for instance, you can fix one of the spins to be up. So the first, do it in the clockwise manner. So go from in the second picture, again, as I can't use the cursor, I'm just going to speak about it. So if you go from 1 to 2 to 3, if you have a spin up in the first lattice side, and then you go to the second spin, then the second spin will have to be oriented down because the interaction is negative. Remember that Jij is minus J. So let's say you have taken to be equal to minus J. So then it will have to be negative, so antiferromagnetically. And then the question is that what will happen to the third spin? Okay, now the third spin has a problem because now it can, because of the fact that they are both negative on this, both the J23 and the J13 are less than 0. So you can have either of this as a possibility. So it can either point upward or point downwards, and so essentially what I'm trying to tell you is that there are these kind of systems with different, because of the interactions, Jijs are not the same across all, between lattice sites are not the same across the system. You can have a large number of states which are local minima of energy. So going from one minima to another requires crossing high energy barriers and is inhibited. So frustration leads to what are called multiplicity of ground states of the system. Again, so this is best described by what are called the free energy given in the space of states. So you, instead of having so if I go from a typical, in the ordinary phase transition from a ferromagnetic to paramagnetic state, you have a spontaneous symmetry breaking, so that below a critical temperature the system will be in one of the two states. So it will either be in plus spin state, this is. So the ordering, remember we had talked about when T is less than Tc, then all the spins are ordered in one direction. Either it points all upward or all downward. So these are two corresponding spin state systems. So you'll have either m as +1 or m equal to -1. So plus m and minus m. And the order parameter, so below the critical temperature, you will have something which looks like that. You have one of these two states, and in the thermodynamic limits, two valleys in this space of states separated by infinite barrier. So it's a ergodicity breaking. Remember that you cannot. So if you're in the thermodynamic limit, you can only be in one of those states. You cannot be in either of them. Now, what happens in the spin glass is that the space of states, which was very simple in the case of paramagnetic ferromagnetic phase transition, now breaks up into many valleys. And each valley is characterized by a average over this spin state, and this is a thermal average. So inside each of these valleys. So this is the whole complexity of this scenario, and this complexity is given by this mathematical, very all students of statistical physics would know that there's a problem here, because obviously if you have to treat the disorder properly, then you have to average over the disorder. And then average would require that this, you have to calculate this log of z, which is averaged over the disorders. Thankfully, what you can do, and it's a prohibitively difficult exercise, what you can do is, of course, you can use the fact that the log of z can be written down as the limit of 1 over n z to the power of n minus 1. And if you do that, so z to the power of n is what you have to calculate. And what you do in this case is to say that this is expressed in terms of identical replicas of the system, because I said that there are these all possible states of the system which are the ground states. So this is what the whole point is. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know how much.
Yeah, so actually we're running out of time. So
I'll quickly summarize. Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, I can't see the time as well. I'm just running blind. So yeah, thanks for reminding me. There's something which is called the replica symmetry breaking in this kind of systems, and what was found is that there was people had tried to explain this by looking at what is called the order. people realize that the order parameter is not just a simple order parameter. There will be a whole possible choices of this order parameter. And what so I'll just quickly say that what Parisi actually said is that Parisi's solution, which Parisi himself in his Nobel lecture described it as nonsensical, which is interesting because at that moment nobody really understood why it was working, but it did work, and it was only later that it was a lot of work by mathematicians actually showed that you can actually get the correct form, and that what Parisi was telling was actually correct, and he gave a prescription to understand how these Q alpha betas, these different order parameters that we're talking about, how can they be these calculations, and how to get a stable solution of the system. So you have to really there's a anyway. So I'll just maybe I'll just conclude that the spin glass theory is one of the leading paradigms of complex physics, and describes in fact it has been found that this idea about how this of spin glass theory, it has been used in different situations in condensed matter, neural networks, and biological systems. It was originally introduced by Edwards and Anderson and detailed by Sherrington and Kirkpatrick, which I had tried to explain. It was readily recognized as one of the fundamental paradigms of statistical physics, and after Parisi's resolution of the mean field theory, has found applications in a huge variety of different fields of research. This gives a rigorous understanding to the physical meaning of complexity and describes a number of out of equilibrium phenomena. I thank the organizers, and I'll just thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek, for a nice talk despite all the glitches.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think in interest of time, I think we'll take only a couple of very brief questions.
Sure.
So questions both for Abhishek and for Raju Tada. Any questions from Zoom? Are there questions from YouTube? So there seems to be no questions. So we'll move on to the next talk, which is by Professor Kapil Pranjape from the Department of Mathematical Sciences. He'll talk to us about Abel Prize in Mathematics. Professor Kapil.
Good evening. So today I'm going to talk about, can people hear me and see me?
Yeah, we can see your slides, Kapil.
Slides, okay, good. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the Abel Prize 2021, which was given jointly to Laszlo Lovash and Avi Wittgenstein. And I should just mention that all the pictures which I'm going to show are all taken from Wikipedia, and there are many articles. Wikipedia is a very good resource for things connected with computer science and mathematics. So I urge those who want to find out more to look at those resources. Okay, so let me start. For many years, the most prestigious honor in mathematics was the Fields Medal, and perhaps many people will argue that it remains so. It's awarded every 4 years by the International Mathematical Union, and it's given to 2 to 4 mathematicians under the age of 40 who have made a significant contribution. And that's a picture of the Fields Medal. Some people, like Andrew Wiles, unfortunately just missed the deadline of being considered for the award. Others, like Harish Chandra, they took their time and transformed the whole area, but by the time they had done this transformation, they were well over 40, and so they could not be considered. Is there something on chat? Okay. So on the other hand, Nobel, when he made his proposal for his prize, left out mathematics, and actually proposed the Abel Prize in 1899. He proposed that the award starts in 1902, which was the centenary of Niels Henrik Abel, another famous mathematician. So obviously is a mathematician whose name has often been heard by physicists as well, because they work with Lie algebras. Abel is a famous person for lots of basic mathematics. And unfortunately, Lee's idea fell by the wayside. There was world wars and so on. And so the idea was revived only in 2001. And the first honorary Abel Prize in 2002, which was the bicentenary of Niels Henrik Abel, was given to Atle Selberg, who is another very famous Norwegian mathematician. And that's the image of the logo of the Abel Prize. Okay. Since then, this award has been given to 1 or 2 mathematicians every year. So the International Mathematical Union gives the Nevanlinna Prize for computational mathematics, again, once every 4 years. But now we have an Nobel Prize, which has been given to the following people who do computational math. André Zemeridi, who got the award in 2012, and Laszlo Lovász and Avi Vidgerson, who got it in 2021. Okay, so of course, the Abel Prize is for all of mathematics, but we are very happy to see that 3 people who work in computational mathematics have, in fact, or things related with computation have got the award. So let me quickly go through a bio of Laszlo Lovász. He was born in 1948 in Budapest in Hungary. He was a child prodigy. He won many gold and silver medals at International Mathematics Olympiads in 1964 to 66. He held various academic positions in Hungary and in the USA briefly, and then he returned to Hungary and he retired there. A side point of interest to some people may be that he's for many years been associated with the Alfred Rennie Institute of Mathematics, and Dr. Keshav Agarwal, who won the President's Gold Medal from IISER Mohali in 2013, is a postdoctoral fellow at this institute. Avi Vidgerson is much younger, was born in 1956 in Haifa, Israel. He did his undergraduate in Technion, Haifa, and then went on to do his master's and PhD at Princeton University, which he completed in 1983. Then he held various positions in USA and Israel until 1999. And in 1999, he joined the Institute for Advanced Study. And a few years later, he in fact resigned his position in Israel as well. So what about the research? Lovász began his research in combinatorics and graph theory in the strong Hungarian group with leaders, well-known leaders such as Paul Erdős. Paul Erdős is, again, is a very famous mathematician who has won many awards, but never the Fields Medal, I suppose, or any of these prizes. Anyway, this group applied techniques from probability theory to problems in number theory, graph theory, and cryptography. Number theory and graph theory and combinatorics for the first time, and obtained results about really large but finite structures. So this point is going to be very important later. So I would like to emphasize this aspect that the systems are very large, but they are finite. One of Lovász's early results is called the Lovász local lemma. And then somewhat later, he gave a proof of what is called the Knaser's conjecture, which is also a theorem about graph theory. Lovász local lemma is about whether certain unlikely phenomena can in fact happen or not, some probability, a statement about probability. One of the most important algorithms which we use today, and we'll talk about this in more detail later, is called the Lenstra-Lovász lattice reduction algorithm, named after 3 people, Lenstra and Lovász. Vidgerson carries out research in a wide variety of areas: randomness and computation, algorithms and optimization, quantum computation, quantum communication, cryptography, and there's a whole bunch of others which he has interest in. The main point is that he uses the secret sauce of computational complexity to, and this is quoting from his Abel Prize page, to see links between apparently unrelated areas. And we'll see some examples of this later. So the citation says that the Abel Prize was awarded to them for their foundational contributions to theoretical computer science and discrete mathematics, and their leading role in shaping them into central fields of modern mathematics. Vidgerson himself thinks that the prize validates the theory of computation, not just his own work. I think it's extremely significant for the field to, in some sense, be finally accepted as a strong field of mathematics, mathematical research. Lovász says similarly that today it's more and more difficult, and I think it's a good development to distinguish between pure mathematics and applied mathematics. So both of them feel that it's not just about their individual contributions that they're being awarded, But the fact that mathematics is now recognizing the coming together of these various areas, theoretical computer science and various areas of discrete math and number theory. So to understand their work, we do need to understand what is the theory of computation. And I would just like to note that an introductory course on the theory of computation has been taught many times at IISER Mohali by the Mathematical Sciences Department. How do pure areas of mathematics like number theory, combinatorics, and graph theory fit in this area? And what kind of problems in these areas are beyond the reach of computers? And what are the practical implications of unsolvability of such pure mathematics questions? So I think people are usually, so anyway, I'll come to that. So these are the questions I will try to look at, and there will not be a time or background to actually delve into the definitions and proofs that Loas and Wilkerson gave. Instead, we'll follow these quoted thoughts and learn about their areas of research by answering these questions which I posed above. So these are the questions I'm going to look at. I'm not going to tell you, the explicit statement of the theorems which they have proved. Okay, so let's start with mathematics and computing. The connection between mathematics and computing is ageless and eternal. Okay. Due to the enormous influence of the Greek school of mathematics, the logical aspect of mathematics often dominates our thinking about mathematics. So the Greek side is often represented by Pythagoras' theorem on this side, which is the picture. And I think this may not be very visible, but this is a page from a manuscript, a book written by Bhaskara called Leelavati, where an algorithm is given. And this is the book by Al-Khwarizmi, which actually gives us the name algebra and also the word algorithm, because Al-Khwarizmi became algorithmus in Latin, and that it is after him that algorithms are in fact named. Okay, so this is a very interesting thing, that it's not as if other mathematicians, of course, the Greek school did think about algorithms, and later on other people also thought about algorithms, but somehow the logical side dominated mathematics for many years, and now we are seeing the algorithmic and computational side come forward as well. So one should understand the distinction between computers and computation. Computers are technology, but computation is a science, or actually is mathematics. Due to the enormous growth of the electronics industry, computers are everywhere, but that unfortunately doesn't mean that more people understand what computation is about. Okay, too many people think that computer science is only about engineering, and we'll see that the kind of problems we are talking about are not problems of engineering. They will not be solved by making faster computers. The study of computation is much older than the study of computers. In fact, it's as old as mathematics. Right? Probably the oldest books in mathematics are about algorithms. At IISER Mohali, we recognize this connection, and in fact, theoretical computer science is considered a mathematical science and comes under the Department of Mathematical Sciences. So let's see where all this begins. Okay, begins as far as the work of the two Nobel Prize winners is concerned. Hilbert was the most dominant mathematician around 1900. The program set out by him seemed to dominate all of 20th century mathematics research. And one of the problems he posed led Turing to create a model for computation. This is Turing at the age of 16. Okay, very well dressed for a photograph. And now we call that model a Turing machine. On the other hand, Gödel worked on Hilbert's proposed foundations and create a computational approach to formal mathematics. So it's an interesting thing that Turing, in some sense, went from the side of mathematics, tried to mathematize what is computation, and in some sense, Gödel tried to computationalize what is mathematics. Okay, and then the two things met in some very interesting interaction. Hilbert asked the following questions, which are paraphrased in modern language. Is there an algorithm which can decide whether a given polynomial equation has solution in positive integers? So is there a program you want to, so maybe it's an algorithm today we'll say program, right? Is there a way to prove that pianos? The second question he asked, which was the question which Gödel looked at, is there a way to prove that piano's axiom system completely and consistently characterizes the number system of integers which we are familiar with? Okay. Turing took up the first question and designed the completely conceptual Turing machine to make this into a mathematical question. Okay. He was able to show that one cannot build a Turing machine which can check the design of every Turing machine. And this led to the idea that Turing machines cannot do everything. Okay. And which became important because these ideas, with some important later additions after Turing's work, were used to show that in fact there is no such algorithm which can decide whether a given polynomial equation has a solution in positive integers or not. When I make this remark, I often joke that it shows that mathematicians have a job forever because the computers cannot take over their job. But it's a bit of a joke, as you'll see. Gödel started on the other Hilbert problem of formalizing the foundations of mathematics. And these studies led him to build a model for turning proofs into computations and vice versa. And this led him to a negative answer to Hilbert's question. So in fact, Gödel's statements come down to the fact that we cannot in fact show that piano's arithmetic is consistent and complete. There are statements about numbers that we can neither prove nor disprove using piano's axioms, or in fact, any finite system of axioms for arithmetic. Okay, so this is what we call undecidability, which is due to Gödel. This should have been a double dot as a wrong accent. And is closely related with unsolvability, which is what Turing said, that certain problems cannot, the consequence of Turing's work, that there are certain problems which cannot be solved. Okay. Now, all this work was pure theory, right? I mean, there are no physical computers at the time when Gödel and Turing did their research. What mechanical calculators existed at the time were at best 10 times faster than human beings, and often later on their calculations were rechecked by human beings to make sure that what they're doing is correct. Moreover, the kind of questions that they said were undecidable or unsolvable, they weren't real world problems in some sense. They were purely mathematical or theoretical constructs to show that certain things are in fact beyond our reach. Hence, there appeared to be no practical interest in these problems. Okay. But once the door to computational unsolvability and undecidability had been opened, it was only a matter of time before mathematicians lured other monsters out of it. This is how my view of how things happen. They said, if some problems are provably unsolvable, surely others can be solved in principle, but can never be actually calculated. Okay, so this is going to be an important theme for us. Initially, this looks like an engineering problem. Build a faster computer, right? And it can't be calculated because computers are too slow. No, that's not the case, we'll see. However, mathematicians know that infinity is a dangerous beast. And in fact, the potentially infinite, when we say that numbers can be very, very large, the potentially infinite or asymptotics is not far behind. Okay, so to illustrate this problem, suppose someone asked you to count up to a number from 1 to 2 to the power 1000. Would you say that this is possible? Let's quickly make a rough calculation, as they say in physics, back of the envelope calculation, right? So 2 to the power 10 is roughly 1000. So 2 to the power 1000 is roughly 10 to the power 300. Okay, this is a pretty large number because there are 10 to the power 80 atoms in the universe, which has existed for 10 to the power 18 seconds. And today computers do about 10 to the power 12 operations per second. So that means if each atom was a computer which as part of its operation developed a number, and every atom gave a different number, we could still do only 10 to the power 110 numbers we could have exhausted out of this 10 to the power 300 numbers. So you're actually about 10 to the power 190 off from the kind of things which you want to do if you wanted to count up to a number like 2 to the power 1000, right? So now it is worth noting that 1 to 2 to the power 1000 only represents every possible number that can be written in 1 kilobit of memory on a modern electronic computer. Okay, and we have gigabytes of memory. So what this says, and this is an inescapable conclusion, is that if some computation required us to check some formula for every possible configuration of an extremely small fraction of your computer's memory, right? We don't have enough time to do this. So this is something which is very important, that if the only approach you have to solve a problem is case by case checking, then there are problems that you will not be able to solve in any practical sense. Not in the lifetime of this universe. Okay, you may wonder, maybe it takes too long to write down such unsolvable questions, right? I mean, already we talked about undecidability, unsolvability. Maybe it takes a long time to write these things down, or maybe they are uninteresting. The work of Lovash, among others, gave us the first approaches to write practical generators for writing such unsolvable. So now when I'm saying unsolvable, this is not in the sense of Gödel, but this is in the sense of practical unsolvability. Okay, and that means it can be done theoretically, but in fact, in the lifetime of this universe, we don't have enough time to solve the problem. The work of Wittgenstein, among others, showed us that such unsolvable problem generators are never uninteresting. In fact, they give rise to useful applications in cryptography, security, data analysis, etc., etc., etc. Essentially all areas of computation. Okay, so let me clarify this point a little more. More precisely, there are unsolvable problem generators, meaning there are generators for unsolvable problems. Maybe they should have come first. Generators for unsolvable problems that generate a problem of size n in a number of steps which does not exceed n to the power k for some fixed k, where k equal to 4 or 6 or something like that. Okay, maybe 12, doesn't matter, some number, some fixed number. Okay. On the other hand, the problems which they generate are such that they take 2 to the n steps to solve these problems, okay, as far as we know and expect. And of course, this know and expect is based on the famous P is equal to not P, and P is not equal to NP conjecture. Whatever known methods we have will take these many steps, okay, or something close enough to that asymptotically. Certainly not polynomial, okay. And so that means that it will take me, let's say, 1000 to the power 4. I'm just taking k equal to 4, which is 10 to the power 12 steps to generate a problem that you cannot solve. Right? For if each step is actually not one computer operation, maybe 10,000 computer operations, it will take me 10,000 seconds, about 3 hours. Maybe it's 100,000 seconds, that's 30 hours. In 30 hours, I can create on a modern computer a problem that you will never be able to solve during the lifetime of the universe. So this is something which, at least it seems, based on the fact that we don't, it's of course based on the lack of knowledge because it's a conjecture, but it's a conjecture which many of us believe that these problems can only be solved by enumerative, by trying 2 to the power n things one by one, case by case analysis. Okay. So number theory, graph theory, combinatorics, how do these areas of mathematics come up in this context of these kind of problems? Okay. The primary reason is that the problems in these areas can be stated simply. So that is one. And the other thing is we have had centuries to study many ways of solving them. They are very old problems. And so we can have some confidence that we have actually looked at a lot of techniques. But of course, new techniques are being discovered every day. So, however, none of them have broken our belief in P being different from NP. Okay. Hence, we can create problem generators for such areas of mathematics, which are very easy to program, okay, and formulate as algorithms. So here is an example. So the factoring problem, you're given a number, you're told that it's composite, meaning it's not a prime, right? And it has n digits, and find a factor different from 1 and n. Right? So it's a number with n digits. N is going to be large, of course, something like 1000 digits or 300 digits. And we want to find a factor which is different from 1 and n. Right? And the obvious method which we know in school, which to try, is to divide by all numbers from 2 to root n. Root n is of size 10 to the power n by 2, which is certainly bigger than 2 to the power n. If n is about 1000, forget it. You can't do it, right? So So you can actually improve on this method. Coppersmith used the Lenstra-Lowas algorithm to provide an asymptotically faster method, but faster than 2 to the power n. Okay, but still slower, but non-polynomial. So still slow. Okay, so it's faster than 2 to the power n, faster than the naive method which we learned in school, but still much slower than what can be achieved in reasonable time on a computer. When n is expected to be the value of a polynomial with small coefficients. So that's also, and the method really works only in a reasonable time if n is the value of a polynomial with small coefficients. So we can choose a different number just to make the problem hard. So let's try to understand what these guys did, Lenstra-Lowas, and see how that algorithm. I mean, I won't really explain how Coppersmith's algorithm works, but now that we have come to LLL, as it's called, Lenstra-Lowas, I want to talk about that algorithm. So what's the algorithm? It's something which is close to things which are familiar to many of you. Given a collection V1, V2, Vm, so certain number of vectors in an n-dimensional space, the assorted lattice, you saw lattices in Abhishek's lecture, is you can think of crystal lattices or architectural lattices and so on. Of course, in physics, most of the lattices they're talking about is Ising model is 2-dimensional and maybe crystal lattices are 3-dimensional. But of course, in mathematics, we will consider n-dimensional lattices for some quite large n. The assorted lattice is the collection of all integer linear combinations of these vectors. Okay, so it's just, you take integer points, you can see them here. They're separated, distinct, and they go like this and like this. Right? So the Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization process, which we learn in basic linear algebra, allows us to convert these vectors into an orthogonal frame. Okay. But the problem is that these coefficients here, we took integers, but these are going to be real numbers because you need to take square roots. So the Wi are no longer in L. Okay. So the question is, can you construct something which is very close to this, but where the Wi's are in L? Okay. So the lattice reduction problem asks us to construct elements of Ui in L that are the closest to being orthogonal. And this problem is classical in some sense for 2x2 matrices. This was first considered by Gauss, even before perhaps 2x2 matrices were defined. And Siegel extended these ideas to show that a solution exists. In other words, there is some way to construct elements Ui which are the closest among all possible choices of a basis for the lattice. These are the closest to being orthogonal. Okay. The Lenstra-Lowas algorithm provides a quick approach. The point is that Siegel's algorithm is again a kind of case-by-case checking. You reduce to checking a large number of elements of the lattice and then pick each one and see whether it works. Okay, and that is, as we know, is going to be a very difficult proposition for us. So can we do something better? And Lenstra-Lowas algorithm provides a relatively quick approach, which means that it's polynomial time to find a solution which is a good approximation. So I should be careful here. It doesn't mean that the vectors they find are close to these vectors. It means that they are very close to being orthogonal. Okay, so it's a good solution in that sense. They're close to being orthogonal, but they're not close to the UIs which Siegel showed exist. However, constructing Siegel's optimal solution is in fact computationally hard in the sense mentioned earlier. So here is a situation where a certain approximate version is actually good and has applications, and on the other hand, the actual solution is computationally hard. We'll see that many problems in computer science which are of this kind are relevant to what we are talking about. And it is easy to create instances of this problem which are actually hard. Okay. So that's I think I am close to finishing my time. Okay, let me just try to, I have only a couple of slides left. So should we care? Why should we care that a bunch of mathematicians or computer scientists managed to tie themselves up in knots, right? They created a system to easily or quickly generate problems that are hard or practically impossible to solve. So what, right? So here are some practical applications which we are going to talk about. One, you have a large computer document which you want to ensure is not tampered with. Can you create a short key that can easily be computed by the checker, which, if it matches the originally computed key, will give you such an assurance, right? So you, given a document, you calculate something from the document. It's called the checksum, and it is based on something called one-way functions. Okay. Then there's another idea is you have a proof like your identity or your signature, and you want to use that in such a way that nobody else can reuse it. Right? So this is something which nowadays with digital signatures, with signatures being done on documents, somebody can cut paste your signature. So can I give my signature to a document in a way that nobody else can reuse it? Is it possible? Okay. Given a data stream, is it data or is it noise? As in the SETI project, whether does this radio noise which you're hearing from the stars, is it a signal from some alien species or is it not? On the other hand, is it possible to generate a data stream that looks like noise but is meaningful only to those who have the key? So what Wittgenstein and his hundreds of collaborators, and he literally has more than 100 collaborators, have shown is that these and many other practical questions have positive answers if you can create just one such problem of easy to create, hard to solve problems. Okay, so though the problem was originally thought of as these unsolvable problems are something which our mathematicians and computer scientists play with, and what use are they? But Wittgenstein and his collaborators in complexity theory have shown that all these practical questions, zero knowledge proofs, randomness, random number generators, and one-way functions, and signatures on documents can actually be created once you can solve these problems. So put differently, they show that if P is not equal to NP, then we can solve all the other practical questions and many others. So I'll stop here. Thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Professor Kapil, for a nice talk. We can address questions.
Yeah.
Are there any questions from Zoom, from participants who joined through Zoom? Are there any questions from YouTube viewers? I think there are no questions from YouTube as well. So I think we'll then move on to the next talk. And thank you so much, Professor Kapil. And participants, if any question, maybe they can write to you at some other point of time, and I'm sure that you'll be happy to respond. Okay, so we'll move on to the last talk in today's session by Dr. Devdulal Saha from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, who will deliver a talk on Nobel Prize in Economics. Over to you, Dr. Saha. So if you can share your slides.
Is my screen visible?
I can see your slides and I can hear you as well.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much, Dean R&D, for organizing this event. And I'm also very thankful for this opportunity. And it is an honor to discuss about the highlights of this year's Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel. The three people they were awarded. The first half has been given to David Card for his contribution to labor economics, and the other half has been given to Joshua D. Ungrist and Guido Imbens for their contribution in methodological analysis in causal relationship in economic sciences. So this is introduction to David Card and some of his notable work. He's born in 1956 in Canada, Then he did a PhD from Princeton University, and currently he is a professor in the University of California, USA, Berkeley. Core areas of his research expertise is on labor economics, inequality, and education. I'll be talking a couple of case studies that he used for developing his core argument. This is Joshua D. Ungrist and Guido Imbens. Joshua, he born in 1960 in United States, but he's Israeli American economist. He also studied from Princeton University. He did PhD. In fact, Joshua and David Card, their PhD supervisor is same at Princeton. But then they, after their PhD, they actually worked separately. So there is no collaborative work as such, as far as labor economics is concerned. And core areas of research of Joshua is on labor economics, urban economics, and economics of education. He contributed a lot of studies and conducted many researches in the field of education, more than urban economics and labor economics. Guido Imbens, he's from Netherlands and born in 1963. He did his PhD from Brown University, and currently he's with Stanford University in USA. His core areas of research, he contributed a lot on quantitative economics, especially in econometrics. And these are the very few notable works that have been actually cited quite a lot, and entire discussion and discourse that they develop basically highly, these are the studies that are used extensively. Core contribution of this, these three people are mainly on applied microeconomics, and David Carr's contribution basically on the applied labor economics. Until 1980s, not much of work has been done on labor economics, especially the applied part of it. And we basically relied on the explanations and causal relations, whatever we used to got, we relied on neoclassical framework of economics. So that was actually challenged by David Card, and then Ungrist, and also Imbens, also methodologically he contributed. In methodology, basically it's very unusual that empirical research that we use in economics. In fact, their contribution, when David Card started from early 1990s, his work and his findings were very badly criticized by many neoclassical economists. And it was, based on some data, and also on relied on some other methods that economists they borrowed from the other field. So these three contributors, they actually contributed in the field of by designing natural experiment, which was a little different than what we used to use, randomized control trial, and also design-based approach that they had considered, and which was very unusual earlier. Like economists, they didn't use much on design-based approach. So background to this research, applied economics, basically we tried to uncover causal relationship. And until 1980s, the causal relationship in social sciences that we mainly used, understood by using standard regression models or randomized controlled trial. In fact, in 2019, Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo, and Michael Kramer, they came up with anti-poverty measures by using randomized controlled trial. But in their own research, they also highlighted the kind of problems that they faced while conducting RCT in their fieldwork. So a lot of questions, important questions that are, in social sciences mainly, that actually researchers could not deliberate by using controlled randomized experiment. And some of the questions that David Cart, put forward was, what is the impact of low skilled immigration on employment and wages? Is there any causal relationship at all? And what we learned from neoclassical, the answer was different. What David Card actually found in early 1990s in a series of studies that he conducted in United States and then later in Europe. Then also, what do institutes contribute or affect economic development? Like, is there any what is the role of public policies or broad institutions in wage and also labor market outcomes? Then also, how does imposition of minimum wages affect employment? Like, again, policy perspective, if laws are imposed, and then how labor market actually will respond to it. So these are the few questions that actually could not get some answer from previous studies, and this is the struggle that they started with. And then also demand for research on observational data has increased, and natural experiments were used and provide a powerful complement to controlled experimentations. And these laureates also used natural experiments and design-based approach in economic research and also beyond. In other fields, especially public health and medicine sciences, they also use these natural experiments. So rationale behind natural experiments that David Card, when he started using in early 1990s, it is basically not under any control, the situation that that he developed. Then exogenous variation, which may arise due to environmental effects, policy, or the institutions. Then also in natural experiments, unlike clinical trial, the researcher has access to data from treatment and control group. So what happens when research is not conducted, but evidence are there? For instance, immigration, the cases that David Card had taken into account is like immigrations from Cuba to United States, especially in Florida. So what happens? Those are the event-based evidences. So I'll discuss a couple of key findings from this research. Then Joshua Angrist and Guido Imbens, although they initially didn't work together, but when David Card posed a couple of basic fundamental questions by using natural experiments, then Angrist and Imbens, they actually came together and tried to understand natural experiments from mathematical and statistical models point of view. So David Card's contribution basically on the labor market's point of view. And the problem that back in 1980s that we found was that in income and earning inequality, mainly in the labor market. And there was no specific explanations to that kind of questions or the puzzle that in labor market that we faced. Then three cases that David Card had taken into account. One is the employment effects of minimum wages, and the outcome was like finding of his study says that there is no detrimental employment effects of minimum wages. So this is actually opposite what neoclassical economists they used to think. Like if minimum wages is increasing, then definitely cost of production will increase, and then there will be downward pressure on the employment, and then employment will be stagnant. This is one way that neoclassical economists, they actually believe. When his article got published in 1994, then actually the findings were criticized, but firmly he believed that no, this is the point. And the answers that explanations that he gave are mainly on the 4 points. First is labor cost, that yes, labor cost will increase, but at the same time, productivity of the workers also will be there, and then worker will not actually will be there with the farm, and then and farm in the process, they will actually save transaction cost of hiring of of other workers. So that is the 2 explanations. The other explanation is price responses and cost transfer. Like even he found that even price, I mean, even wages get increased, then farm owner or manager, they will actually not affect, I mean, negatively, because they will in any case they will transfer that cost to customer, and then customer will actually bear that extra costs, extra cost that will will be arisen by this increase in minimum wages. The other one is market power of employers, like basically monopoly market that will be created, like a single buyer, and then farm wage, farm wage that will, I mean, the way farm will actually set the wage is basically based on the characteristics of buyer and seller. So this is the broad contribution of David Card on employment and minimum wages. The second hypothesis that he had taken on the case study, which is the impact, which is actually on the Mariel boat lift, and on the Miami labor market. And this is actually quite interesting, because this is the fear that always local economy thinks that negative impact of immigrant workers or immigrations on the local or native workers. And then he actually challenged that, and Mariel boat lift, I mean, this particular event happened in 1980s, when over 1 lakh immigrants, they came from Cuba and landed in Miami, I mean, especially in Florida. So labor market outcome, when his study found that there is no detrimental employment and wage effects on immigrations on native workers. Again, this is absolutely opposite what earlier existing theories actually had shown. Explanation was immigrants actually inflows and native outflows. This is the first effect that he found by using natural experiments. And then this immigrant and native workers, they are not perfectly substitute. They could be complementary, or some other industry actually in Miami and also in areas nearby Miami. There are a lot of industries. The industries growth has been found during that time, and they actually accommodated immigrant workers, and also they created they created markets for other commodities as well. So there was economies of scale, and therefore there was no crisis like situation what was expected from policy perspective. And then of course the technical change based on immigrants worker skills, job was created, and kind of job that they received, it was not accepted by local or natives. So this phenomena we also see in many of the cases in developing countries, including India. The third case on it was on effects of investment in education, and then he tried to understand that what would be the impact on labor market outcomes. So earlier studies had shown that yes, if there is investment in education, then obviously future earning will be high, and labor market outcome will be success. So this was the earlier theory says, and David Card also says the same thing. But what he emphasized that yes, but not only because of training and investment on research and development, but it is also based on some other factors which were not considered before. And the first point that was explained by David Card is compensatory resource allocation. That was not actually taken very seriously. And then the second point was the first point is compensatory resource allocation, how we are allocating fund when we receive in various sectors within education. Then return on education increased with teacher density. So it was not only investment and return on education was increasing, because rather this particular like return on education and future earning had shown little weak relationship. But here, David Card actually had shown with the case studies, from school quality and black and white, that particular case studies that he had taken in 1992, and then also another one studies that he had taken up was on returns on education and public schools. And then he actually highlighted based on that teachers' density actually played very important role more than even investment. Then investment in education influence students' success on labor market, mainly those who are from disadvantaged background. And here David Card said that, highlighted that black students got more benefit and has more labor market outcome as compared to white students. So Joshua Ungrist's research it was actually on education, mainly on education, but also had highlighted labor market outcome. And he tried to show the association between education and income. So correlation between years of education and income shows positive as expected, and also other researchers like other Nobel laureates also had established that. But causation, like what is the causal relation, that was actually not very clear. By using natural experiments, then he highlighted with Krieger, another one researcher, Alan B. Krieger, and Alan B. Krieger also had contributed along with David Card, who passed away in 2019. So their studies, Krieger and Joshua Ungrist's study, mainly they highlighted that year of birth, and especially in the United States, that actually played very important role. Like if somebody's born in early quarter of the year, their market outcome is different than those who are born in the later quarter of the year. So again, they also highlighted like quality of teaching, then teacher-student ratio. Books are very important as compared to other factors like training, then investment in various other in education sector. So those are also important, but more than that, this quality of education, teacher-student ratio, and books are more effective and has contributed more. So methodological approach, then David Card, Joshua, all of them, they actually used natural experiments. And then Joshua Ungrist and Imbens, they actually joined, they came together and then tried to develop, okay, so how methodologically it could be developed as compared to other methods like RCT and all. So natural experiment is design-based approach, which is not under control of subject of the study. So it was actually, there was no treatment or control group. It was absolutely based on the observation. And then quasi-experimental approach for causal inference was used to address questions of great significance, especially in economics and beyond, and mainly on the social policy and public policy debate. So, and basically in design-based approach has very minimum set of assumptions, which actually was less time-consuming and also very cost effective. And some of the social factors like natural calamities or environmental issues or some policy or laws, those are quite dynamic in nature. So they actually wanted to understand the effect within very short period of time after the study is conducted. So that was possible by introducing instrumental variable, which is this effect is referred as local average treatment effect. This is the main contribution of methodological, as far as methodology is concerned, and this is the main contribution from Guido Imbens. Instrumental variable was merged with the potential outcome framework for causal inference. Basically, this instrumental variables actually endogenous variable, but it was also response to the external variables like policy responses or others, like say institutional or any sort of administrative rules are applied. So those are the exogenous variables. It also has the absorbing power. So advantages of this methodology, especially natural experiments, brought rigor and transparency to the analysis, and it was very cost effective and time effective. So in conclusion, this is in a way it is revolutionized kind of approach that empirical research was conducted especially in economics, and later it also extended to others field, especially in social sciences, and it also public policy research got a lot of benefit out of it, and it has relevance in contemporary issues like the way we are having migration. Like this was the question in one of the reviews, recent reviews was mentioned, like what would be the what would be the impact of COVID-19 on learning outcomes in education. So there was actually ongoing studies that are actually going on, and it also suggests that like migration crisis that we faced during COVID-19, like internal migration. So the fear was migration will take the job away from locals and so on and so forth. So these are the fear, and also like say Rohingya crisis, for instance, in Indian context, or say this Citizenship Act, or and how that will impact on the local labor market or local economy. So these are the contemporary research also can be studied by using natural experiments based on observational data. And David Card produced actually new and more reliable answers to better understand how labor market actually functions, operates, which was actually not very clear in previous research. So I'll stop here. So thank you once again, and I'll be happy to respond if any question comes.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Saha. So any questions from participants from Zoom or YouTube? Okay, so there are no questions. So let's thank Dr. Saha again. Yeah, so with this, we come to the end of today's program. On behalf of the Office of Research and Development, I would like to first of all extend my heartfelt thanks to all the speakers for taking time out and delivering wonderful talks. A big round of applause for all of them. And if participants have any questions at any point of time, I think they can always write to our faculty members, and I'm pretty sure that they'll be happy to answer them as well. I thank our director, Professor Gauri Shankar, for his guidance in planning this event. I am extremely thankful to our colleagues, Dr. Amit Kulshrestha, Dr. Sugumar, and Dr. Santosh for their tremendous help in coordinating this event through the online platform. Thank you to all the participants who joined either through Zoom or YouTube. And thanks to the members of our Research Advisory Committee, faculty colleagues, students, and postdocs for their participation and for joining us today. Thank you all. Wish you a great evening ahead.
Thank you.